Romance Rendezvous. Chapter 171. Please help me. Part 1. No, no, impossible. It's impossible. Nils staggered, her body shivering as she rejected this new reality with every fiber of rationality she still held. Why? He has no cause. There is no point. Even the most over-suspicious of emperors will not resort to such means. There must be a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. But as she attempted to convince herself of otherwise, Nils' eyes fell back on the soul worm and reality forced her back into the truth. Among the Holy Flame Empire's pure-blooded paragon spirits, those with the ability to cultivate soul worms were not many. Those who dared, fewer. If on top of that, the person needed to be one of her close relatives, her father was indeed the most likely suspect. But why? Not just her, but of all the people Conrad mentioned, the soul worm's use only made sense on Adelar. And even then, it was too extreme. Why? Elmar only vies for power because father raised him to. Were it not for father, he would be happily married to the Schlesinger Duke's daughter, having no care for who held the throne. Why force him on this path but still infect him with such a dreadful thing? If Adelar could reach this level of power, it's because father allowed him to. He could have effortlessly suppressed him in the cradle. As for the Holy Empress and the Holy Consort, one is his lover and the other his most trusted. What are the gains? This makes no sense. Nils roared, her mind failing to grasp any reasoning in those nefarious deeds. Because on the road to supreme power, you're his stepping stones? Conrad smiled and placed his hand on Nils' forehead, letting her witness Yvonne's words, Ulrich's display of madness, and Wenzel's atrocious death. The blood, the souls of 1,000 newborns, the souls of the closest kin. Such a dreadful art exists in this world and is cultivated by my father. If she weren't in her soul form, Nils would have spat blood on the spot. Still, her mind faced imminent destruction. She now understood why her sixth brother had suddenly disappeared, and no one dared mention his fate, using an amalgam of ridiculous lies. Conrad didn't assist her, knowing that if she couldn't find the strength to overcome this truth, helping her was meaningless. Fattened with love and care. I understand. The worms are to make sure he can incapacitate and refine us at all times. I can also understand, but why? Because he must first let you fulfill your potential. The farther you go on the cultivation road, the more benefits he reaps when the harvest time comes. At least, that's my belief. As for why the Dowager has not been infected, that's because she's too strong. The current Ulrich can simply not face her. Nils finally grasped the entire situation, but in her glazed eyes, Conrad saw imminent destruction. The series of blows, too hard to bear. However, as she suffered internal collapse, Elmar's image appeared within her mind. Eldest brother is in danger. Save him. I must save him. In a flash, Nils' eyes shone with renewed vigor. The determination within them startling Conrad, who believed his death had caused a substantial rift between siblings. What he didn't know was that Elmar's imprisonment was no misfortune, but a blessing in disguise. At least, any sensible person would see it as such. Since the 50 years ago events that resulted in his lover's death, Elmar had not been able to cross another sublimation, remaining at the 7th step of the semi-holy rank for 5 decades. But thanks to Conrad's ploy, he could entirely let go of his imperial power pursuit and once again become a man that put love and relatives above all else, thus fixing the cracks in his Tao and achieving his 8th sublimation at one fell swoop. He was also infinitely close to the 9th. Romance Rendezvous. Even Ulrich guaranteed that at his current cultivation speed Elmar would break through the rising saint rank in less than 20 years. Being the eldest von Jürgen prince, even if he didn't get the throne, the next emperor would still have to honor him as elder brother and grand prince. He could still enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. Better yet, as one who passed the Celestial Church's examination, Elmar had always been destined to join their ranks. Once the pursuit of the throne was out of the way. When he broke through the rising saint rank, He could abandon the secular world to join the celestial church as a priest. Though his rank would start low, with his talent, a dazzling future awaited him. At the very least, he would become a celestial deacon. Therefore, unbeknown to him, Conrad opened the road for Elmar's bright future. As for Holger, couldn't destroyed cultivation be regained? With his previous experiences and Elmar to support him, 10 years would be enough to return to his previous level with a stronger foundation. Therefore, Nils never took her mother's fears seriously, knowing that she was a frivolous alarmist, first and foremost. In her mind, having turned misfortune into blessings, those two were the greatest beneficiaries of Anselm's wrongful death. But now, the situation was different. Elmar faced unparalleled danger. This, she wouldn't allow. Even if they fought and bickered, he was her beloved brother. Fighting and throwing tantrums at him was her right. Who dared take his life? Father, my life originally came from you. If you want it back, I have nothing to say. However, threatening my brother's life, I won't allow it. Save, regardless of the cost. I must save Elmar. Nils straightened her back, staring into Conrad's purple eyes with unprecedented willpower. Anselm, I beg you, please help me save him. As long as you help me, I will follow all your arrangements and obey your will. Nils urged while seizing Conrad's right hand. Conrad stared back into those enchanting silver eyes of Nils, feeling the determination rippling within and the hands that trembled around his. People will die. Those who deserve death shouldn't live. Innocents will perish. I will take care of their families, no matter how big, and guarantee them a bright future. Nils stammered, finding such words difficult to speak. However, although they made her hypocritical, she would stand by them. Conrad realized Nils' closest relatives were the foundations of her transformation, and his lips curled into a devilish smile. Good. Then let's make something perfectly clear. Ulrich will die, and I will usurp his throne. However, there is one difficulty. You don't have Paragon spirit blood. Therefore, unless you can challenge the Celestial Church or obtain the backing of the infernal cult, the day you take the throne is your time of death. Although Nils still inwardly resisted the thought of taking her father's life, to save them all, it was a must. Otherwise, if his deeds were ever exposed, there would be no von Jürgen left on this world. Conrad nodded. However, to obtain the backing of the infernal cult, I risk becoming their puppet. That's not happening. What do you think is the proper alternative? Nils couldn't find the answer within her mind, but when she saw Conrad's wolfish grin and licentious eyes, the answer immediately appeared. Her cheeks reddened, and she tossed Conrad's hand away before taking several hurried steps backward. Anselm, you can call me Conrad. Nils von Jürgen, we will have to work hard so that you give me a son that can hold the throne until my strength rivals that of the Celestial Church. It's a race. If you can't, others will. Nils' entire face burned, and she aimed a wobbling finger at Conrad's insolent face. Conrad, in this short life of mine, I've never met a more shameless and dissolute man than you. Chapter 172, Please Help Me. Part 2. Flattery will get you everywhere, Conrad shamelessly replied, rendering Nils speechless. Aware that engaging this fiend in a battle of words could only result in her miserable defeat, she lowered her accusatory index while maintaining her safe distance. But as she eyed him like a wary lamb before its predator, the meaning of others' will dawned on her. Nils' brows wrinkled while her frowning eyes asked for elaboration. Conrad answered the silent inquiry with that dissolute smile of his, forcing Nils to speak the words on her lips. Who are the others? Although Nils already knew about Ileana, she didn't expect Conrad to be surrounded by many others. However, when she recalled he posed as a eunuch within the palace, dreadful thoughts flashed within her mind. As far as Paragon Spirit Baby production is concerned, you only have the Empress as your competitor. But for baby production overall, your competitors are in the 3 digits. Conrad explained with a false sigh of helplessness. Nils' eyes widened in stupor. You're betting the Empress? Conrad nodded, pleased that Nils always grabbed the core issue. Nils couldn't comprehend what method Conrad used to bed the stately woman wearing the empress crown, and the image of Verena doing the dirty with him caused a new wave of red to spread on her cheeks. This time, however, she didn't let shame suppress her, rushing toward Conrad to tug on his robe, eyes flaring with indignation. While I mourned your death with warm tears, you were actually touring the gardens of the imperial palace. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? How can you be so mean? However, as she spoke, Nils realized she made two mistakes. First, such words could never work on the fiend before her. Second, she'd stepped into his range and could no longer escape. Conrad seized her by the waist, pulling her chest against his. Too bad this is just your soul world. But as Conrad's lips edged closer toward Nils, he stopped, and his eyes contorted into a frown. He came earlier than I expected. Conrad raised his right hand, and the two vanished from Nils' soul world. Back in his chambers, Adelar had been patiently awaiting his goon's triumphant return. According to his calculations, even with the two semi-saints protecting him, Conrad couldn't endure 10 minutes. However, time proved him wrong. Half an hour after they set out, there was still no news. How could this be? Did I miscalculate anything? Having gathered exhaustive information on Conrad's staff, Adelar couldn't understand where his negligence lied. He frowned, then cast out his soul to spy on Conrad's mansion. What he didn't see baffled him. There was no sight of the formidable team he dispatched, the scent of blood, smoke, and the unconscious eunuchs being the sole remainders of the clash that had occurred. Before the mansion's entrance, Conrad stood, holding Nils within his arms. Stumped, Adelar swept the mansion from his soul's eyes, hoping to find some hidden expert. But besides those two, he couldn't find anyone worth mentioning. This morning Nils was still mourning that Anselm boy. Tonight, she's allowing that eunuch to embrace her? Not right. In a flash, Adelar analyzed the possibilities and came to one disturbing conclusion. Could it be only one way to find out? Adelar's cold eyes flashed with determination. His soul then turned into a gray fog and dived into Conrad's mind. Inside, a purple world awaited. Feeling the robustness and suppression force within this soul, Adelar frowned. But before he could start his analysis, a booming voice echoed from all sides. Daring to step into my soul. Bold. In your stead, I'd be too horrified of what I'd find within. A pity this boldness will cost you dearly. Conrad's figure appeared before gray fog Adelar. Knowing that hiding held no use, Adelar dispersed the disguise, revealing his true self. I didn't expect that it would turn out to be you. I didn't expect that you would be so petty. TSS, TSS, TSS. Is a little eunuch worth this much trouble? Worth using leading members of the Imperial Guard as common thugs? Adelar, you really think highly of me. When Adelar attempted to exert his dominance over this soul world, his frown deepened. The realization that he'd fallen into a trap dawned too late. Dressed in his Imperial Duke robe, Conrad faced Adelar with his hands on either side of his hips and his face clouded by purple fog. On the contrary, it seems I didn't take you seriously. Never did I expect that my secret adversary would turn out to be you. I also didn't expect the dead Anselm Crack to be the mastermind behind all these events. Or rather, the outstanding Anselm was fake to begin with, and the real one died to cover your tracks. Accursed negligence, however. Though he couldn't see his face, Adelar could feel how undisturbed Conrad remained despite his discoveries. Aren't you afraid I will report you to Father? And say what? Dear Father, I dispatched high-ranking members of your Imperial Guard to take your adoptive son's life. But they all mysteriously died, and when I explored his soul, I discovered hidden might? Conrad chortled. Touché. In any case, past today you won't be able to do much talking for a very long time. If you think you can destroy my soul, you're in for disappointments. From the soul power and soul density he felt, although he couldn't judge Conrad's cultivation, Adelar inferred it had, at the very least, reached the mid-level of the semi-holy priest rank, perhaps even the high level. But even then, such cultivation could never challenge him. At the sight of Adler's confident smile, Conrad sneered. Who said anything about destroying your soul? Conrad raised his hands, causing dark purple fog to erupt and assault Adler's soul. His eyes shone with fighting intent, and his gray fog erupted to contend with Conrad's. But through the first confrontation, Adler could clearly feel his disadvantage. Although his soul power surpassed Conrad's, it was, after all, his territory. That alone more than made up for the gap. The dark purple fog morphed into two massive violet hands that flew toward Adler's sides, surrounding and trapping him within their enormous palms. Bang! The two violet hands descended in brutal palm strikes that sent tremors throughout the soul world. Adler shouldered the assault by forming a shield from his spiritual mist. However, his soul still suffered substantial damage. Conrad joined his palms, causing the violet hands to turn into a deluge of arrows that barreled into Adler's spiritual shield, poking holes within and piercing his soul. An ugly grimace appeared on Adler's face as the arrows pierced his chest, leg, and abdomen. Hateful, gritting his teeth, Adler turned into gray fog, shot into the distance, and slammed into the soul world sky to force his way back into the real world. What do you think this is? Your family's playground? You can come when you want to and leave when you want to. Not that simple. Conrad clenched his palms, causing vast purple fog to descend onto Adler and erode his soul. But before he could strike a definitive blow, Adler squeezed every last bit of his soul power to break free of Conrad's suppression and flee his soul world. What a pity. Conrad lamented as Adler escaped. Oh well, we won't be hearing about him anytime soon. Sleep well, my dear brother. Back in the real world, Nils, who remained unaware of the confrontation, eyed Conrad with incomprehension. Though his eyes stared into hers, their glazed look showed no life. Conrad? Conrad, what is wrong with you? As if awakened by her words, Conrad's eyes regained their vigor, and his lips curled into a contented smile. Nils was startled, wondering what kind of wet dream that depraved mind of his had just undergone. Was it good? She asked with a reproving, I know what you were up to. Look, while gripping Conrad's back. Good. Very good. But not anywhere as good as what I will do to you. Conrad laughed, sweeping Nils off her feet to lead her back into his chambers. Unredeemable brigand. Let go of me. Nils thrashed within Conrad's hands. Are you sure about that? Hum. I guess it doesn't feel that bad, even a bit comfortable, just a little bit. As she wrapped her arms around Conrad's neck, Nils attempted to turn her eyes away from his, unable to shoulder his roguish gaze any longer. But before she could, Conrad leaned in, seizing her lips into his. Immerse. In that stance, he led her back to his chambers. Chapter 173, Please Help Me Part 3. In a gentle motion, Conrad lowered Nils onto his bed, breaking their kiss to take in her silver doe eyes. Naturally, he'd reassumed his true appearance. Held captive by his shimmering purple eyes, Nils raised her hands to stroke his cheeks before pulling him into an ardent kiss of her own and using passion to make up for what she lacked in skills. Their tongues intertwined, dancing and coiling like mating snakes. Meanwhile, Conrad's roguish hands caressed Nils' clothed body, fondling her modest mounds and teasing her nipples from beneath the fabric. Immerse. Nils moaned within Conrad's lips, her body heating up under his touch while a novel sensation tangled within her lower abdomen. And as drops of his saliva slid down her throat, her temperature shot up, her body set ablaze by an unknown source. Ah! Their lips broke with Nils panting beneath Conrad's depraved gaze. Her burning cheeks and eyes echoing the mixture of expectations and dread blending within her mind. Conrad lowered his lips onto her dress straps, pulling them down with his teeth while teasing her with his glances and letting his fingers trail her inner thighs. Nils' heart thumped with trepidation, her inner thighs moistening at rapid pace while apprehension gradually made way for lust. As he undressed her with his teeth, Conrad unbuckled his belt, letting it drop on one side, while Nils removed his crown and instinctively helped him out of his large imperial duke robe. Her panting breath grazed Conrad's nose, bringing a contented smile on his face while the drumming of her heart enchanted his ears. With their clothes out of the way, Conrad hickeyed Nils' neck, kissing her bare body from top to bottom, from the chest to the feet, before rising to her flower bud and flicking his demonic tongue over it. Aha! Nils' body trembled, electrified by this unexpected move. With his left index, Conrad teased her clit while his right hand played with her breast, and his lips embraced her flower bud. Using her moans, he determined the pace, and when they reached a crescendo, his tongue dived in, exploring her fold with masterful expertise. Oh, yes, right there, oh. Oh, oh, oh. Having never experienced such ministrations, Nils surrendered to Conrad's touch, her hands holding on the back of his head to instinctively keep him pressed against her slick fold. The first orgasm then hit, and her tasty nectar gushed in Conrad's mouth while she clenched her thighs around his face. Swept by the pleasure wave, she lied down, arms spread on the cushy bed while her lips remained in an O shape. Fantastic, she whispered for herself. We're only getting started. Conrad rose, his erect incubus meat rod towering above Nils at full length. Are all men's things this imposing? Nils couldn't help but ask, startled by the meat girth and length before her eyes. And though its scent kindled her lust, thinking of this mighty spear piercing her unexplored garden, she shuddered. Just the well-born, Conrad replied with a mild laugh before aligning his rod with Nils' flower entrance. Feeling the fear returning in her eyes and her body tensing up, he let his orchid scent spread to ease her. Stare into my eyes and think only of me, Conrad said while lifting Nils' leg to give himself better access. Obediently, she nodded, and as Conrad poked her entrance, she stretched out her hands to welcome him. Conrad. The whisper came like an invitation. Conrad activated his 100-flower scripture, golden light erupted from his rod, and he dived in, breaking Nils' hymen in a small thrust. The sharp pain pulled a yelp from her lips, but before it could expand, the golden light spread within her, soothing her insides and turning ache into bliss. With small thrusts, Conrad explored Nils' gripping fold, letting it accommodate his girth and adopt his shape before driving faster into her. Oh, Conrad, yes, Conrad, Conrad. The delightful moans spurred him on, and as his golden light created pleasure spots throughout Nils' inner garden, Conrad no longer held back, conquering her insides with firm thrusts. The pounding then began, and Nils soon found herself wrapping her arms and legs around Conrad's flawless body, holding onto him and moaning in reckless abandon as he hammered her insides and brought her to unknown pleasure worlds through a succession of orgasms. Spooning her, Conrad took her from the side while she held his face and twisted her neck to kiss him as he hit home, so to speak. Sensing his peak approach, Conrad sped up, shortening the intervals between the sounds until he grunted and exploded within Nils. Meanwhile, as his soul returned to his body, Adler's bloodshot eyes widened, while his irises shrunk and his muscles spasmed. Second brother? What's wrong with you? Lorenz asked in stupor, but no answer came from Adler's lips. Blood flowed from his orifices, while veins burst all over his body. He dropped onto the bed, arms outstretched and eyes still wide open. However, Lorenz could see his consciousness lost. Were it not for his heart that still beat, he would have truly thought him dead. What is the meaning of this? What am I supposed to do? Should I use the pill? Loren's mind almost surrendered to fright. But before it did, he recalled Adler's trump card, and his eyes flashed with hesitation. But it's too soon. What to do, what to do? Following a long moment of hesitation, Lorenz pulled out a bronze box from one concealed drawer, then cut open Adler's wrist to let his blood flow onto it. The box opened, revealing a bright red pill that basked in crimson light. Loren's eyes shone with determination. Grabbing the pill, he forced it down Adler's throat, letting it dissolve within him. In his soul world, the wounded Adelar battled against an eldritch purple fog that prevented him from patching the holes within his soul. At that time, red light descended from his soul world sky and crashed onto him. Adelar scowled. Damnable Lorenz, damnable Conrad, hateful. But as quickly as it came, his scowl vanished, replaced by indifference. Oh well, man proposes, heaven disposes. In any case, preparations were almost complete, and I wasn't far from the threshold. Father, Conrad, I pray you enjoy your last days in this world, because when I wake up, my rebellion begins and your lives end. The crimson light filled Adelar's soul, turning his left eye from gray to red. Chapter 174 Rune Carving. Within his mansion, Conrad carried on with Nils' introduction to the pleasure worlds, plowing her field and inseminating her in various positions while she moaned in delight, her mind surrendering to ecstasy. Following their lovemaking session, Nils slumbered within Conrad's bed, and while she lied beneath the sheets, Conrad headed out to complete his mansion's internal cleaning. The two imperial eunuchs Ulrich had planted within his staff awoke, their minds subdued by the phantasm orchids. "Greetings, master," they hailed before falling on their knees. Satisfied by the result, Conrad nodded. "Your daily routine remains the same. If Ulrich asks you for reports, you just tell him that I focus on my cultivation and nothing strange occurs within the mansion." "As you command, master. Also, clean the entrance and make sure no trace of fighting remains." Throughout the Holy Flame Empire, perhaps only Conrad would dare use semi-saints as housekeepers. Naturally, the servants didn't feel offended, carrying out their master's orders with as if their lives depended on it. Afterward, Conrad went back in, finding the maids and eunuchs that cowered within various corners of the mansion to rewire the females and force orchids down the males' throats, thus enforcing the loyalty and obedience of every single member of his mansion. An uneventful night followed. As dawn approached, Conrad gently shook Nils, who snuggled against him. "Wake up, sleepyhead. I can't have you leave my mansion in broad daylight." "HNNN?" Nils' eyelids trembled, and she reluctantly awoke to Conrad staring at her with an amused smile. At first, she wished to give small complaints, but when the sight of his bare body appeared within her eyes, her cheeks flushed red, and she hid beneath the blanket. Recalling what occurred during last night, Nils couldn't find the strength to face Conrad. "What, feeling shy now?" "Nah, you can't feel shy. Not after going, oh, Conrad, oh, 4 hours." Conrad's teasing words caused the floundering Nils to no longer know where to put herself, feeling that she had no face left. If she could dig a hole to hide, she would. "You bully," Nils mumbled while keeping her red face hidden. Conrad shook his head and pulled the blanket away from her. "Let's discuss proper business. I could, in theory, remove your soul worm. However, doing so will alarm your father. Therefore, that'll have to wait." Having never expected Conrad to possess such skills, Nils was startled. After all, without extraordinary soul powers or special abilities, harmlessly removing soul worm was impossible. Clearly, Conrad was still far from that soul power level. However, when she recalled that golden rod, Nils' surprise vanished. "Also, I suppressed your cultivation breakthrough. You should keep the energy accumulated from this dual cultivation session store and gradually release it. A sudden level leap will surely alarm your father." If before someone told Nils that she would partake in dual cultivation, she would have never believed. Once more, she felt all her face lost but still nodded in approval. "As for your dad, what do you think you should do?" Conrad asked in a mild but serious tone. "Across the following weeks, I will slowly reduce my anger toward him, then apologize for my behavior and ask for his forgiveness," Nils replied, following a brief moment of reflection. "Good girl." Conrad gave her forehead a gentle kiss, and in that instant, Nils inwardly wished time would stop flowing. Then they both got dressed, and using his invisibility skill to cloak them, Conrad led Nils back to her chambers before returning to his quarters to spend the remainder of his time in cultivation. When dawn made way to the first rays of sunlight, Conrad opened his eyes, standing up to prepare for the upcoming meeting. Standing by Ulrich's side within the throne room, he listened to the court reports, while taking notes of his father's replies. Afterward, he followed Ulrich to his study for further lessons. Son, your posture is a total disaster. You're the Imperial Duke, my ninth son. When facing the officials, you should stand tall, hands on either side of your waist, back straight, and eyes staring directly into theirs. Like this. Ulrich demonstrated the pose, adopting it with masterful expertise. Go, imitate. Yes, father. Following Ulrich's will, Conrad mimicked the pose, causing Ulrich to nod in approval while his lips curled into a contented smile. Remember, regardless of what cultivation level and title they hold in the outside, within the court, they're courtiers and you a lord. You can give them respect, but you can never show them deference. Understood? Ulrich taught in a doting elder's tone. Yes, father. I will not lose your face. Conrad vigorously nodded, broadening Ulrich's smile. Good son. Good son. Father prepared many spell scrolls for you to study. Improving your cultivation is all right and good, but if you don't know a few spells, how can you defend yourself? As your cultivation improves, I will give you access to better spells. Ulrich summoned a eunuch to deliver the scrolls to Conrad's mansion alongside a new batch of resources. Thank you, father. Hey, that's a father's duty. You can't thank me for that. Today I also want to teach you about the rune carving arts. Genuine expectations flashed within Conrad's eyes as Ulrich's words left his lips. Rune carving was a secret art known by a scant few, and the foundation of formation creation. Finding a teacher in that art outside the church was at best challenging. Even within the imperial family, not many were well-versed in it. Ulrich was one of the few. Even if you possess sky-high soul power, without decent rune carving skills, setting formations is impossible. I hope you can learn well to become an outstanding formation master. Ulrich declared while holding Conrad's shoulders. Father, your son will not disappoint you. Satisfied, Ulrich pulled out a blue crystal which he presented to Conrad. In theory, you can carve runes on any surface. However, crystals are the best processors of runes. We use soul power as both scalpel and guide to engrave the runes on the crystals. Like this. White light shone at the tip of Ulrich's right index. Bringing the crystal closer to his eyes, he used that index to effortlessly carve a rune onto it. Clearly, his mastery of the art had reached a transcendent level. As the carving ended, Ulrich presented the rune to Conrad, who could feel the energy hidden within. When your soul power reaches a certain level, you can carve runes with your mind alone, having no need to use fingers. Masters of the art can carve hundreds of runes in a heartbeat. Different formation levels require different crystals. Naturally, for the same formation, the better the crystal quality, the better the result. The runic alphabet has a total of 3,046 characters. With your Grand Priest cultivation, you should be able to digest them all. I will now impart them onto you. White light burst from Ulrich's forehead and morphed into thousands of symbols which flew into the expectant Conrad's mind. The runic alphabet then appeared within his mind. Memorize. Memorize. Good. I've had eunuchs send you coffers of crystals. Now your task is to practice rune engraving. I will test your progress and guide you on a daily basis. But as Ulrich's words ended, a panting imperial eunuch rushed in and dropped onto his knees. Your Majesty, a terrible accident occurred. His Highness, the second prince, suffered cultivation deviation and is now bedridden. Chapter 175, Entering the Warring State Era Part 1. Ulrich's head abruptly turned to the imperial eunuch who could not shoulder the intensity of his gaze. What the hell did you just say? Though his tone remained mild, both Conrad and the imperial eunuch could feel Ulrich's emotions rising and about to spiral out of control. Those are the third prince's words. And after investigating, I've come to the same conclusion. The second prince suffered soul damage from cultivation deviation and is currently bedridden. Useless waste. Ulrich's holy force erupted, barreling into the kneeling eunuch, who flew toward the wall. Bang! The eunuch's body slid onto the ground, his internal organs damaged. Your Majesty, please calm your anger. This was beyond our control. The eunuch pleaded while spurting blood. I asked you guys to keep an eye on him, and the first useful report you bring me is that he suffered cultivation deviation? If you're not a waste, what are you? A traitor? Those words filled the eunuch with fright, and he banged his head against the floor in a brutal kowtow. Your Majesty, I, your servant, am guilty of negligence. However, my loyalty is clear to all under heavens. Please do not doubt it. Ulrich sneered. Conrad, I'm afraid our meeting ends for today. Go back to practice your spells and rune carving. When you reach a sufficient level, we can start learning about formation setting. Ulrich said, then turned into a gray lightning bolt to fly toward Adler's quarters. Conrad's eyes fell on the kneeling eunuch, who from Ulrich's tone and expression clearly belonged to Adler's camp. Thinking of the eunuch's future fate, he shook his head, then returned to his mansion to practice rune carving. Meanwhile, Ulrich dived into Adler's room, and ignoring Lorenz, who stood by his side, checked his pulse. Though irregular, it still beat. You're the one that discovered him? Yes, father. Lorenz replied with a bow. How long has he been like this? I can't say for sure. I just came to give my greetings when I discovered him. Again, Ulrich sneered and extended his hand toward Adler's forehead. His holy force spread within his body, analyzing it through and through, and when he made sure that the vital functions remained unharmed, he checked the situation of Adler's soul. Just like the body, the soul was currently dormant, showing no sign of when it would wake. However, although he could clearly feel it in the process of recovering from soul damage, Ulrich frowned. But as quickly as it came, his frown dispersed. Soul damage is hard to treat. We can only supplement his soul power and wait for him to wake up. I will make the necessary arrangement. Yes, F.A. But before Lorenz could finish his words, Ulrich swept his sleeves and, in another gray thunderbolt, left. Back within his mansion, Conrad sorted Ulrich's gifts, then began his rune carving practice. With his current soul power level, carving runes shouldn't have been a difficult task. However, the lack of experience in the area proved a hurdle. Vanishing within his space mansion, Conrad used the time-warping clock-equipped cultivation room to diligently practice rune carving across 5 days, stopping only for brief cultivation sessions. At the end of the 5th, although the runes he carved looked a bit shabby, at least he could carve them. At the same time, he collected EXP through his avatars, then used it to purchase new recipes for his businesses and cultivation resources for both his harem members and his demonic beasts. It should be almost time for Kron's return. With Kron's hidden support, the Prosperous Wind Third Prince managed to carry his maimed body back to the Prosperous Wind City, his broken sight immediately sending it into an uproar. The guards at the city's entrance immediately sent the news to the palace, alarming the Prosperous Wind Emperor, a muscular middle-aged paragon spirit man, who personally flew toward the city gate to receive his son. F.A. Father. The third prince muttered before fainting in his father's arms. Though many questions swirled within his mind, the Prosperous Wind Emperor set them aside, using his holy force to stabilize his son's critical condition before carrying him back to the palace for an expert healer to take care of. Soon, he was out of danger. Your Majesty, the third prince is now safe. However, the healer struggled to finish his words, causing the already irritated Prosperous Wind Emperor to snap. However, what? This, His Highness manhood has been compromised. The Prosperous Wind Emperor's eyes widened, and his rage filled them. He leaped from his throne to appear before the trembling healer. You said what? Alarmed, the healer dropped onto his knees, and with his eyes staring at the ground beneath him, exclaimed, My apologies, Your Majesty. The third prince has been eunuched. The Prosperous Wind Emperor staggered on several backward steps before regaining his footing. He then vanished in green wind to reappear in his son's resting place. The third prince's mother knelt by his eyes with warm tears streaking down her face. The third prince himself had now woken up. However, as if unwilling to face his new reality, he could not keep his eyes. As soon as the emperor appeared, before he could say anything, the prosperous wind empress grabbed his legs and, with warm tears still dripping from her eyes, roared, "Your Majesty, you must give our son justice." To become the Holy Continent's most harmonious imperial family, the prosperous wind ruling house made many sacrifices, the first of which being that the emperor only had one woman, his empress, and took no other consorts. Thus, the empress was the mother of all the imperial princes and princesses, and the sigh of her youngest son abused in such a wanton manner made her lose all propriety. I will naturally not let this go without investigation. Whoever harmed my son must surrender his life. Son, tell father, what exactly happened to you? Where is your fifth uncle? Why didn't he protect you? The prosperous wind emperor asked while restraining his anger. Hearing the mention of the fifth uncle, the third prince's face contorted with anguish. Father, please restrain your grief. Faced with such a reply, the prosperous wind emperor felt as if lightning had struck him from above. He lowered his trembling hand onto his son's forehead, bearing witness to the memories of his brother bringing his maimed son into hiding before self-destructing to repel the Earth Kingdom assailants. Again, he staggered, but this time, tears filled his tormented eyes while his body seethed with wrath. Grand Imperial Eunuch. The head of the prosperous wind imperial eunuchs appeared by the emperor's side, kneeling in reverence. Here I am, your majesty. Send my decree. The Earth Kingdom Alliance King has 24 hours to deliver his head alongside the perpetrators of this sinful deed. Failure to do so, and I shall burn their 13 kingdoms to ashes. I swear not to rest till no soul remains. Hearing such dreadful words, the imperial eunuch leader shivered. However, he dared not hesitate. As you command, your majesty. Without delay, he turned into a beam of light, using his peak semi-saint cultivation to shoot toward the Earth Kingdom Alliance's capital and deliver the imperial decree. At his peak semi-saint speed, he reached the Earth Kingdom Alliance's capital in less than 5 minutes, landing before their royal palace to announce his arrival as the prosperous wind messenger. Chapter 176, Entering the Warring State Era Part 2. Although the Earth Kingdom Alliance's central palace was taken by surprise, they still welcomed the messenger with due honor. Afterward, they alerted their Alliance King of an urgent prosperous wind message. As a messenger, he should at least wait for a day. Who does he think he is to disturb me in the middle of night? Have him wait. The Earth Kingdom Alliance King, a tall and rotund paragon spirit, roared. However, when his servants attempted to have the eunuch wait, he sneered. Earth Kingdom Buffoon King, for the murder of his fifth brother and the maiming of his son, his majesty, the prosperous wind emperor demands that you submit your head, alongside that of all the murderers, to the prosperous wind city. Failure to do so in the next 24 hours results in all-out war. His majesty swears not to rest until no soul inhabits the Earth Kingdom Alliance. The eunuch's booming voice spread throughout the city, alarming all its denizens. He then turned into a beam of light and returned to his realm before anyone could bar his path. When did we have prosperous wind imperial kinsman murdered? Why am I not aware? The Earth Kingdom Alliance King asked his servants in stupor while dropping the large chicken leg in his hand. Wait, did he call me a buffoon? The gals. Meanwhile, Kron returned to Conrad's side. You've done well. I'm very pleased with your work. Thank you, Master, for your praise. Conrad nodded, then had 12 large bags fly toward Kron. Those are resources to accelerate the demonic beast training. I will also periodically set aside more blood to hasten the growth of the most talented. You can now resume with their rearing. As you command, Master. Kron then vanished into the space talisman where the demonic beasts remained, not forgetting to carry the bags with him. Conrad then used the remainder of the night to cultivate his infernal soul-devouring art. On the following morning, as per usual, he attended the court meeting by Ulrich's side. Initially, it should have been an uneventful one, but as the officials carried on with their talks and reports, a disheveled messenger barreled into the throne room to kneel between the two rows of officials. "Your Majesty, please forgive the interruption, but your servant carries urgent news." Both Ulrich's and Conrad's eyes fell upon the kneeling messenger, and Conrad was surprised to see a high-level transcendent knight occupying such a role. "Oh, speak. What is so important that you interrupt court meeting?" Though Ulrich's tone was mild, Conrad didn't doubt that if the messenger didn't carry important news, he would perish on the spot. But the messenger didn't disappoint, his news sending the entire court into an uproar. "Your Majesty, the prosperous Wind Emperor is gathering a 3 million-man strong army to overrun the Earth Kingdom Alliance." "Huh, you said what?" Instantaneously, the dozens of officials' eyes fell upon the messenger, who didn't budge under the inquisitive stares he received. Even Conrad was startled, for he had not expected things to process at such a rapid pace. This was far too soon. Nonsense. The prosperous Wind Empire has always advocated world peace. Across 100,000 years of history, they've rarely declared wars on non-barbarians, and never in such a scale. Now you're telling us that the prosperous Wind Emperor is gathering a 3 million-man strong army? That's half their state forces. Who believes you? The Chancellor interrogated, unwilling to trust the messenger's words so easily. And though he didn't validate the words, Ulrich was inclined to agree. Even if he wished to fight with the Earth Kingdom Alliance, unless the prosperous Wind Emperor's brain was kicked by a donkey, he could never muster such a force. If others got evil intent, how would he protect his rear? "Your Majesty, your servant dares not deceive you. We've received news that the prosperous Wind Third Prince's convoy was ambushed by Earth Kingdom Alliance assassins less than a day after leaving their capital. The fifth Elder Prince was murdered, and the third prince barely escaped with his life." The prosperous Wind Emperor flew into rage, demanding the Earth Alliance kings and the murderers' heads. The title of Elder Prince referred to an emperor's brother. Hearing those words, Ulrich was no longer surprised. Considering that man's disposition, he would fight tooth and nails with whoever harmed one of his relatives, to say nothing of two. However, this made absolutely no sense. Although the Earth Kingdom Alliance King is a well-known buffoon, he's, after all, a monarch. Knowing the level of his forces, how dare he assault prosperous Wind Imperial kinsmen? That's the first issue. Moreover, even if such a thing occurred, prosperous Wind should have dispatched a messenger to ask for an explanation before such a drastic move. That being the case, they should still be in the interrogation stage. How could he already be gathering armies? This was precisely what Conrad wished to ask, and hearing Ulrich's inquiry, the messenger wavered. "Well, your servant cannot answer the first issue. As for the second one, the prosperous Wind Emperor adopted a formidable stance, ordering the Earth Kingdom Alliance king to pay with his and the murderers' lives." Hearing this, the Earth Alliance king flew into rage and "Speak clearly," and retorted that the prosperous Wind Emperor had his brother murdered and his child maimed to frame the Earth Kingdom Alliance and get an excuse for war. When those words reached them, prosperous Wind immediately declared war. Ulrich's eyes widened in stupor. He didn't dare. Inwardly, Ulrich and Conrad wantonly praised the Earth Kingdom Alliance king's guts. This was the kind of men one could always count on in desperate times. Well, Great Void's response should arrive soon. As if to answer Ulrich's thoughts, another messenger dived in. Your Majesty, urgent news. Speak fast and clearly." The Great Void Empire received a formal request for help from an Earth Kingdom Alliance Saint Elder. The Great Void Emperor pledged to defend the innocent Earth Kingdom Alliance and save his sister and nephews. Ulrich nodded, but before he could make a statement, another messenger dived in. "Your Ma, just give your news." Ulrich cut, unwilling to let formal greetings delay breaking news. "Yes, Your Majesty. The Earth Kingdom Alliance Queen is dead, allegedly murdered by prosperous Wind assassins." Alongside his officials, Ulrich's mouth formed an O shape. Great Void Emperor, Great Void Emperor, your heartlessness truly knows no bounds. I'm impressed. Ulrich didn't doubt that the Great Void Emperor dispatched one of his strongest elders to take the life of his sister, the Earth Kingdom Alliance Queen, to strengthen his righteous cause. Your Maj. And again, another messenger dived in. But before he could speak, Ulrich cut. Your news? Huh. The Great Void Empire is asking the Water Kingdom Alliance for their troops' free passage. The Water Kingdom Alliance King is floundering and swears to follow our lead. Again, Ulrich nodded, then turned toward Conrad, who maintained a genuinely baffled look. Genuine because he'd not anticipated the death of the Earth Kingdom Alliance Queen. Conrad, look. Heaven has set the stage for us to unify the Holy Continent. Shouldn't we give our thanks by rushing those fools into destruction? Awakened by the words, Conrad turned and bowed toward Ulrich. Following his lead, the officials did the same. Your Majesty is wise. Chapter 177, Using Chaos to Reap Profits. Ulrich's attention dropped back onto the kneeling messengers. You, tell the Water Kingdom Alliance King to give Great Void free passage and not gather any troops until we tell him to. You, when the Prosperous Wind Empire sends a messenger to request assistance, have him wait for a day. Then tell that as his father-in-law, the third prince's pain is my pain. Therefore, the Holy Flame Empire will back them in this war. Then send him away. Also, for the next 3 days, I will enter secluded cultivation and will not see anyone. Court dismissed. If the first 2 orders gained the approval of the officials, the third took them aback. However, they dared not object and excuse themselves. Ulrich then led Conrad back to his study. Although I will not be available to guide your training for the next 3 days, I hope you will still practice diligently. I will never disappoint your expectations. Conrad replied in a bow. The current situation still requires some adjustments. You may take your leave. Ulrich thus dismissed him. He then gathered all his imperial eunuchs and redispatched them to various tasks meant to escalate the conflicts. Then, he vanished from the imperial palace. Upon his return to his mansion, Conrad hears of 2 of his eunuchs being transferred to another department and replaced by younger ones. Those 2 were naturally the imperial eunuchs within his staff. Clearly, with the current events, Ulrich didn't wish to waste such resources on him. Good. Now we can get back to work. Conrad promptly forced phantasm orchids down the new recruits' throats, then entered his space mansion to reorganize his forces. Kron, Margot, the 2 of you will carry several batches of phantasm orchids. One to subdue the remainder of the 12 dukes and the margraves, the other for Wolfgang to sell as cure for the drops of heaven's addictive effect. You have 3 days. He ordered, then sent them an orchid-filled bag which they obediently welcomed. You can consider it done. Alongside Kron, Margot left the space mansion, then vanished from the imperial palace to carry out the task. At nightfall, Conrad smuggled a few other phantasm orchid batches to Ralph and Alan, who then carried them to Hans to sell as cure for the drops of heaven's addictive effect. His goal was straightforward. First, take over the addicted and use them to spread the drug at a faster pace, then repeat the operation. Using the eunuchs and maids, he would target the low-ranked concubines with shallow background, then use them to target the mid-ranked consorts. Outside, Wolfgang would do something similar through the black market and help him compromise the low and mid-level nobility. He then stood up and, using his invisibility skill, headed toward Verina's quarters. What do you think is Ulrich's plan? Conrad asked, lying on Verina's lap while she stroked his cock. Let Great Void's armies join the Earth Kingdom Alliance without a hitch and have them meet Prosperous Wind on the battlefield. Prosperous Wind will not be able to handle the 2 forces and request our help as future in-laws. When they do, Ulrich will dispatch 2 forces, an elite force composed primarily of archknights and above, to take Great Void cities, and a lesser force strong enough to maintain the stalemate between Prosperous Wind and the other 2. At the same time, he will have the Water Kingdom Alliance attack the Great Void Empire on the other side, thus forcing them into splitting their attention. Verina's words perfectly followed Ulrich's plan. And to worsen the conflict, he resolved to personally murder several prosperous Wind Imperial kinsmen and let them blame it on Great Void. Interesting. I need a favor. When news of our involvement in the war spreads, please use it as an excuse to have the inner court's core ladies gather. I will take control of them on that occasion. That's a small matter. Verina's right hand hastened around Conrad's rose while with the left. She cupped his balls, leading him into a blissful release. They then separated, and Conrad returned to his quarters to await future development. 2 days afterward, shocking news spread through the empire. 2 of the prosperous Wind Empire's elder princes alongside their crown prince perished in one night. Unable to shoulder the blow, the prosperous Wind Emperor spat blood, and in a fit of rage, gathered what remained of his armies to descend upon the Great Void and Earth Kingdom Alliance armies. That night, Ulrich emerged from seclusion, humming a pleasant tune that caused those that saw him to wonder what put him in such a good mood. At the same time, within her quarter, Else was receiving the visit of a cloaked figure. "Holy consort, it's time to show your stance. Her ladyship asks me to tell you that if you want her to remove your soul worm, you must coordinate with her in the destruction of the Holy Flame Empire." Chapter 178. Thus begins the plague. As she sat cross-legged within her cultivation chambers and listened to the cloaked man's words, no sign of hesitation flashed within Elsa's blue-slit eyes. "You may thank her ladyship for her offer, but I respectfully decline. The Holy Flame Empire welcomed House Metz in its times of need. Though we bear irreconcilable contradictions with the Church, though the Emperor has fallen to insanity, I have no desire to see this country destroyed. This was never part of our agreement. Else of House Metz doesn't do such shady business. See yourself out, and unless Lady Gulistan is willing to instead support a change in dynasty, do not return." Elsa's uncompromising words annoyed the cloaked man, whose tone immediately chilled. "Ungrateful wretch, without her ladyship, you would now be a pile of bones. If only for her life-saving grace, you should comply." Said bluntly, "I don't know what she sees in you. How many houses, how many saints would be willing to pledge allegiance to the infernal cult and her ladyship when given the opportunity, but you refuse? A fool, that is what you are. The time of the Holy War approaches and House Circer doesn't give second chances. If you're adamant on rejecting the lady, then death is your only future." Clearly, the cloaked man didn't put Elsa's profound saint cultivation in his eyes, staring at her with naked contempt. Else ignored him, no additional word coming from her lips. The man shook his head, and unwilling to waste any more time on what he saw as an inferior breed, vanished from the scene. As he disappeared, Elsa's eyes rose, aiming toward Conrad's mansion. With his cultivation level, the man didn't require any special skill to freely come and go within the Holy Flame Imperial Palace. By the time he'd vanished from Elsa's sight, he'd already reappeared in another location, one that clearly didn't befit his status, the red light district. Though he stood amidst the many bystanders, none could feel his presence. Soon he reached a specific brothel and stepped in. Using the previous body owner's memories, Conrad could have effortlessly recognized it as the place he grew up in. Upon entering, the man vanished to reappear in a simple room where a handsome middle-aged man writhed on the only available bed with a delirious look on his face. "Ah, yes, ah." The man groaned as if in the middle of a mind-blowing sex act. The cloaked man ignored him, turning to a corner of the room where a woman sat with her legs crossed and eyes shut close. She wore a long burgundy dress that showcased her ample cleavage and highlighted her perfect curves. Though her eyes remained closed, her transcendent beauty was evident, and within, one could find some resemblance to Conrad. Or rather, it would be more accurate to say that Conrad was the one that resembled her. Long eyelashes donned her forehead while her calf-length ink hairs brushed the ground. When the cloaked man's eyes fell upon her, hers opened, revealing a bewitching pair of jet-black eyes that absorbed the soul. She stood up, emerging from the dark corner to reveal a skin tone akin to the Iranians on Earth. And although no cultivation aura rippled from her, the man looked at her with awe and reverence. "Greetings, Lady Gulistan." She was Conrad's mother, Gulistan Circer, and before her, that man who only had contempt to offer else immediately fell onto his knees in a show of allegiance. "You may rise," Gulistan's chilling voice that contrasted with that perfect face of hers echoed. "Thank you, my lady." What is the girl's reply? She refuses to help in the country's destruction and firmly rejects your ladyship's good intentions unless you wish to instead support a change in dynasty. Though she didn't elaborate on who would replace who, clearly, she means for the Mets to replace the von Jürgen. The man sighed, but hearing this, no ripple flashed within Gulistan's eyes. Is that so? Since Conrad liked her as a pet and was so saddened by her disappearance, I wanted to give her the opportunity to truly join our side and have her serve as his maid. But I suppose overconfident ants must always resist the will of giants. It matters not. In any case, the preparations are complete. The item will soon arrive, and past this year, there will be no empire left in the Holy Continent. Gulistan's lips curled into a gentle smile that made the cloaked man shiver. Though his cultivation stood at the star-connecting saint rank, leagues above any man of the Holy Continent's secular world, before this young lady of his, he couldn't help but momentarily surrender to fright. But who could blame him, be it in cultivation or status? She was not of his world. Should we alert the young master? No, let him play some more. When he gets bored and frustrated, he will naturally come home. Although some of his deeds eluded her, Gulistan was perfectly aware of Conrad's awakening and most of the events that surrounded him, and thinking of his inexplicable transformations, her eyes shone with expectations. On the next morning, Conrad received Ulrich's summon. Then, following court meeting and daily exercise of rune carving and spellcasting, Ulrich had Conrad sit by his side. "I will not keep this hidden from you. We will soon engage the Great Void Empire with our elite troops while using a lesser force to support the Prosperous Wind's stalemate. Thanks to the Prosperous Wind Emperor using his entire country's cultivation power beneath the semi-holy rank, Great Void was forced to expand even more resources, leaving many cities unguarded. We can, therefore, begin our assault and swallow their cities. However, to make sure we can at least take 40% of their territory, we must use the Water Kingdom Alliance to divert them on another front. My hope is that feeling destruction approach, Great Void breaks the Grand Treaty and openly uses semi-saints and above as soldiers. Then we can descend upon with the full might of the Holy Flame Empire and remove Great Void from the map. However, that's not likely to happen. Your task is to carry this Imperial token and act as my emissary in the Water Kingdom Alliance to welcome their eldest princess into our lands. When Adelar awakes, he'll marry her." Though he received the token, Conrad frowned, perplexed by the words. "But father, I know, you fear they might look down on you being a eunuch, but this token is not just a decoration. It carries my holy force. Enough for 4 blows. If anyone disrespects you, bomb them. You will lead a team of 6 high-level semi-saints and 15 peak stage transcendent. The 10th elder will also be by your side. This should be enough to give them face and allow them to understand my intentions. It is a pity, but I must admit that my gifted trueborn children are all unfilial and can't be relied on. Therefore, as your cultivation improves, I hope you can represent me on the international stage. This is an opportunity for you to show them the expectations I place in you. As for that eunuch state, in due time, we shall fix it." Ulrich cut Conrad, anticipating his fears. Having nothing more to say, Conrad could only agree. "Seeing the expectations you place in me, I can't find words to express my gratitude. I can only renew my oath of loyalty and pledge to serve you till my dying breath." Conrad sobbed while falling on his knees to show filial piety. "Silly child, no need mention death. You and I will live long and prosperous lives, side by side, across millennia." Ulrich bent his knees to help Conrad's up. "Yes, father." Conrad then left to prepare for his departure. In any case, this was an opportunity to see what lied beyond the Holy Flame Empire. By the time he returned, his servants should have made great progress, and Verena should be ready to gather the inner court's leading consorts in one place. Conrad spent that day between the warmth of his harem and silent cultivation. As night fell, he broke through to the sixth step of the transcendent night rank. Knowing that this would be his last opportunity to spend time with Yvonne's true self before a while, he exited his space mansion, ready to use his invisibility skill to sneak into her quarters. But before he could, Else appeared at his front, her face uncovered and her eyes showing internal struggle. At that time, within her brothel, Gulistan received a new guest. It was a handsome, young human male who appeared to be in his mid-20s. Of course, his actual age was much higher. The resemblance in their skin tone and facial features clearly identified him as one of Gulistan's relatives. "Aunt, as ordered. I bring to you both the girl and the treasure." The man bowed toward Gulistan and presented both the cloaked figure at his left and the coffer in his right hand. Gulistan ignored the girl, her eyes focusing on the coffer which flew toward her. However, her nephew's eyes could not leave her, and clearly, there was dissatisfaction within. "Unwilling to see the girl offered to your younger cousin? How could I dare? Cousin is the son of our most revered god. Who dares covet his goods? It's good that you know." But although she could see the words didn't match the eyes, Gulistan paid him no further attention, giving the coffer a light tap that caused it to open. A green prism appeared, brightening the room with green light. And thinking of the quantity of merit this prism required, Gulistan's eyes shone with seriousness. Gently, she pulled the green prism into her hand, then glanced toward her nephew and the cloaked girl that silently stood at his side. "Thus, children, Operation Plague begins." Crack. Gulistan squashed the prism within her palm, causing dark green miasma to spread from within the heart of the Holy Flame Empire throughout the Holy Continent. Chapter 179, Why Not Me? Part 1. The darkness of night reigned within the sky, and billions soundly slept, unaware of the world's changes. But throughout the Holy Continent, those with substantial cultivation awoke, startled by this scent and miasma that flashed by their faces and irritated their noses. Ulrich sat on his throne, expecting the future developments when suddenly, the dark green miasma flashed before him, then carried on its way. Having never seen or felt such a thing in almost 1,000 years of existence, he frowned. However, relying on his personal knowledge, he failed to assess what just occurred. Therefore, he used the infernal souls. And even from them, he could only make vague assumptions. But those assumptions terrorized him. Could it be? No, impossible. How could such a thing occur in a mortal world? Ulrich shook his head, dismissing his thoughts. But as his apprehensions vanished, a dreadful possibility echoed within his mind. Unless, no, they wouldn't dare. It's not worth it. The gains just don't equate the losses. Confident that he guessed wrong, Ulrich dismissed his apprehensions, returning to his war plans. Meanwhile, Yvonne sat cross-legged in silent cultivation when the miasma passed her by. Discomfort spread within her body, but as soon as it came, it dispersed. However, although she didn't have Ulrich's information, as the miasma reached her, she could feel her demonic blood trembling. This was a sensation only demons could experience. The recognition that a mighty force of their hierarchy descended upon the world. However, no matter how she analyzed herself, Yvonne couldn't feel anything wrong with her body. That being the case, she set those feelings aside, letting her mind drift to Conrad with whom she kept contact through her pure self. And although reason told her that nothing should have befallen him, she could barely sit still. In such fashion, all the hegemons of the Holy Flame Empire and even the Holy Continent as a whole were struck by perplexing feelings as the miasma passed them by. It spread until it reached the Celestial Church's headquarters. There, the same phenomenon occurred, but while it triggered concerns from the disciples, priests, deacons, and protectors, when it reached the elders there wasn't much reaction. Is the infernal cult muddled? What could they possibly gain from resorting to such drastic measures so close to the next holy war? Asked one of the elders in a mental message that spread through the other elders' minds. This matter is fishy. The result doesn't match the merit loss. Even to gain dominion on the faith level, they shouldn't use this. There must be a hidden ploy. What hidden ploy could there possibly be? Don't they just want to force us into crippling our merit reserves to save those holy continent ants? A nonsensical thought. They should know very well that this is the last holy war, the final battle of extermination. In the end, only one shall remain standing to open the gate back to its respective higher realm. At this juncture, how could we possibly waste our merit reserves to save those base and low ants? As the celestial elders exchanged thoughts, their leader sat cross-legged with his eyes shut close. No, there must be a deeper reason, and we should observe the developments to find what it is, and counter it before it can bring us lasting harm. Following the celestial church leader's words, the elders nodded in their various locations and returned to cultivation. At that time, just like all others, Else and Conrad received the visit of the dark green miasma. Else was lost in thoughts, while Conrad felt his demonic blood tremble. Since his arrival in this world, this was the first time he felt his bloodline startled. His face contorted into a frown. However, while his blood shivered, he could feel his Stola's physique soothed by the miasma, as if in its natural element. Startled, Conrad's eyes immediately turned toward Yvonne's quarters, and ignoring Else who stood before him, he shot toward it. However, as he passed her by, Else grabbed his wrist, stopping him mid-flight. Why such worries? You're all right, I'm all right. Why should she be any different? Or is it possible that when it comes to her, your brain no longer works normally? Else questioned, and though her tone showed neutrality, displeasure hid within. Even if reason tells me that she's fine, my eyes must verify it for my heart to be at ease. Don't worry, I am not harebrained. I have skills that allow me to come and go freely. Conrad declared, and attempted to yank his hand free from Elsa's. Unwilling to let go, she pulled him toward her, before slamming him against the adjacent wall. While blocking him within her two slender arms that stood on either side of his shoulders, Else stared directly into Conrad's eyes, and the longer she stared, the deeper her frown became. Did you fall for her? Elsa's words took Conrad aback, and for a second, he didn't know how to reply. However, that hesitation vanished as quickly as it came. What if I did? What if I didn't? What does it have to do with you? Those callous words pricked Elsa's heart. Clearly, she could feel the wariness and barriers Conrad set between them. I don't understand. You can take dozens of women without a second thought, but why is it that your heart can't accommodate me? I have never done anything that wasn't in your interest. Before all the others, I was there. Before Yvonne and Verena, I was there. But why is it that you can accept them but can't accept me? What do they have that I don't? I can't accept this, especially Yvonne. The world doesn't have a haughtier, more unbridled woman. Why can you tolerate her, fall for her, but remain wary of me? The glaring pain in Elsa's blue-slit eyes and the erratic drumming of her heart pulled a sigh from Conrad's lips. You want to know the difference between the two of you? Good. Then I shall be blunt. Throughout the Holy Flame Empire, there is only one woman I never had to deceive. Only one woman I could always be myself with. With her, there will never be a need for tricks, because we are a match made in hell. We find support in one another. Only she can understand my heart, and only I can understand hers. That woman's name is Yvonne Voigt. Conrad's straightforward words forced Else back. Failing to shoulder them, she staggered. You ask if I fell for her. Frankly, I don't know the feeling. Therefore, I can't answer you. However, if you ask me for the sake of whom I can cause the destruction of billions without a second thought, the first name that pops in my mind is hers. As for you, Conrad stepped forward, holding Elsa's gaze while his face approached increasingly closer to hers. Ambition ripples in your eyes. An ambition that doesn't lose out to most men's. Yvonne pursues unparalleled cultivation, strength unrivaled. To her, Ruling the lives of trillions holds no appeal. As long as with a sword she can behead deities, she is satisfied. But I want supremacy. I want the trillions of existences throughout the multiverse to obey my will. That across all realms, the name Conrad brings mortals, devas, and demons onto their knees. That without my permission, none dares calls himself a monarch. One name, one ruler, one existence, holding the three realms in submission. That is my life's dream and highest aspiration. The summit of world domination. So tell me, you who wish to be an independent ruler, to hold the empire within your grasp, and the lives of billions beneath your feet, how can we be together? I like that my women have strong personalities and something that drives them to excel. My women have a right to their own ambitions. But the premise is that our goals don't conflict. Because I don't compromise and must have all I want. And what I want is everything. Conrad stretched out his arms, his eyes shining with bottomless ambition, the scope of which startled even else. So, tell me, are you willing to forsake your dreams, to forsake your aspirations for the sake of being mine? Conrad raised his right hand to hold Elsa's chin between his thumb and index. He leaned in, his lips approaching dangerously close to hers. If you are then, prove it. Chapter 180. Why not me? Trapped beneath Conrad's uncompromising gaze, Else floundered. Saying that ambition drove her was absolutely correct. And why shouldn't it? Who decreed that Else couldn't be the monarch? That the Holy Flame Empire's women needed a man to validate their status? Why couldn't it be the other way around? If all things within the Empire obeyed her will, how could her brother fall to the Holy Flame Church's assassination? To truly protect her loved ones, she not only needed formidable cultivation but supreme authority. Therefore, the thought of giving up her dreams and aspirations made her stomach churn. Moreover, love is ephemeral, passion fleeting. Were such untrustworthy sentiments worth the sacrifice? Conrad could understand Elsa's train of thoughts. Alas, humans were not wolves, and even then, a distinct hierarchy existed. While he could in due time overwhelm her mind, there was no point in that. He didn't lack servants. He lacked officials. The majority of his core harem members were still too young and weak. It would take time before they matured. Else needed no such time. Her mind sharp and her cultivation profound. As long as she could change pursuits, he would take her on the spot. Conrad had great plans and expectations for his harem, hoping that one day, an invincible battalion of 10,000 Valkyries would sweep the three realms by his side. It would be his delight to have Else as one of their leaders. But as she floundered within his hand, inwardly weighing the sacrifice's worth, Conrad felt her pride standing in the way. With a sigh, he let go of her chin and turned heels. But seeing his departing form, Else realized that should she fail to hold him back, then regardless of what happened in the future, she could never stand close to him. Instinctively, she wrapped her arms around his abdomen, holding him tight with an intensity showing her unwillingness to let go. Don't leave me. Conrad, I love you. For you, there is nothing I'm not willing to do. Nothing I'm not willing to give up. As Elsa's chest pressed his back, and her heart's drumming intensified, Conrad could feel the strength those words pulled from her. Satisfied, his lips curled into a smile. This is our checkpoint. Are you sure you won't have any regret? But as she felt the warmth of his body against hers, Elsa's inner resistance crumbled. No regret? Conrad spun, seizing Elsa's waist to lift her toward him. Their lips met in an ardent kiss that convinced Elsa of the correctness of her choice. Raising her arms, she enlaced Conrad's neck, her ample breasts pressing his muscular chest and connecting their drumming hearts. The passion heightened, their tongues intertwined in an unabashed, frivolous dance that propelled their body heat to scalding levels. Their lips broke, their faces separating and allowing Conrad's eyes to feast on the holy continent's #1 beauty's smiling face. He was forced to admit that rarely had he seen such a compelling sight. Backpedaling, Else reached the bed where she lowered the straps of her crimson dress and let it slide beneath her breasts until it dropped onto the ground. The revelation of Elsa's bare body and her feline eyes that echoed her need for him kindled the flames of Conrad's lust. "I want you." The sultry melody of Elsa's voice reached Conrad's ears, and in a flash, he crossed the distance separating them to effortlessly lift her above his head. Maintaining her above, Conrad spread Elsa's legs before his eyes, revealing her flower bud that moistened beneath his gaze. Holding her pert butt, Conrad lowered her flower onto his lips, kissing and teasing it with his tongue while not forgetting to give her clit due attention. Driven by the jolts of electricity that coursed through her riveting body, Else warped her legs around Conrad's neck, holding the back of his head while gently rubbing herself on his lips. "Ah!" A soft moan escaped Elsa's lips, emboldening Conrad's tongue. It dived past her entrance, the demonic saliva already corrupting her insides as his tongue extended to lick all her pleasure spots. Pulling it out, he flicked it across Elsa's clit, then greedily sucked on its tip, causing her moan waves to reach a new peak and her body to tremble in ecstasy. Elsa's grip tightened on Conrad's neck, and her body trembled in orgasm. Keeping her in suspension, Conrad climbed onto the bed before lowering her onto it. Without delay, he freed himself of his heavy ornaments, revealing his dreamlike body for Elsa's feline eyes to feast on. "Let me taste you." How could Conrad resist such a generous offer? His half-erect member rose to full length, towering before Else, who knelt at the altar, so to speak. The uncertainty in her eyes showed her lack of experience. Although she'd studied the topic in her leisure time to not lose to Conrad's more experienced women, practicing theoretical knowledge was a different matter. Pulling in a deep breath, she grabbed the base of Conrad's rod within her right hand, and as its heat spread within, she cupped his hefty balls in her free palm, massaging them while she lubricated Conrad's rod with a drizzle of spit. Gentle pumps followed, and as her hand glided on Conrad's fierce member, Else licked the underside while keeping her eyes locked on Conrad's to use his expression changes as guide. Confidence soon set within, firming her slow pumps. Her pace then shot up, and as she jerked off Conrad's rod, Else kept her tongue on its tip, licking and teasing the shaft until she felt the rod tense up. Slurp. Driven by desire, she buried Conrad's rod within her mouth, gagging as she forced it down her throat in an almost desperate effort. "Oh!" Conrad's excitement peaked, and in a low grunt, he released his spunk down Elsa's welcoming throat. However, his rod didn't falter, remaining rock-hard as Else pulled it out of her mouth in a lascivious slurping sound that perfectly matched the spunk dripping from her lips. Still, she held his gaze, as if that eye contact was more precious than the act itself. Using her hands as support, Else lied on the bed, spreading her legs and presenting her flower for Conrad's assault. "Take me." A woman that knew what she wanted. Conrad needn't hear it twice, and while activating his 100-flower scripture, aligned his cum-dripping shaft with Elsa's entrance. With a slow thrust, he tore her hymen, but this level of pain, this very little to destabilize the nearly 3 centuries-old cultivator. As her blood dripped, she seized Conrad's cheeks, pulling his face close to hers and holding his gaze with piercing intensity. Though she said nothing, Conrad understood the words within her eyes and replied by pulling out his shaft, then driving it back into Elsa's fold, impaling her all the way to the hilt. The pounding then began. The rhythmic assault of Conrad's ferocious rod shook Elsa's body, and as she swayed beneath him, enthralled by his hip moves, she was once more convinced of the correctness of her choice. Once his golden and purple lights spread within Else, Conrad felt no reservation, thrusting like a rutting animal, and pulling her into that frantic flesh dance whose debauched sounds bounced against the walls. But as their first wave ended, and Conrad released his load within her, before he could carry on with the second, Elsa's voice stopped him. In my excitement, I forgot to mention, your mother wants to destroy this country and is most likely the source of this strange miasma. If you can't stop her, half this world is likely to turn into a wasteland. And I think ruling wastelands is not a thought you find particularly thrilling." Conrad stopped dead in his tracks, pulling out of Elsa's snatch to stand above her with flabbergasted eyes. Care to repeat that? Chapter 181, at least 49. 999, 500, 000. As Elsa's words echoed, Conrad's mind underwent a 360-degree turn. I'm not privy to the details, but one of her servants came to demand my allegiance and support in her endeavors. Endeavors meant to end this country. And just a day after my rejection, this eldritch miasma spreads? How could there be such a coincidence in the world? It's very likely that she set her plans in motion. That Else remained in contact with Conrad's mother was no surprise. Without a certain level of proximity, how could she be privy to his demonic nature? From the flame mark, he'd also learned of the great wars of extermination that brought civilizations to extinction. However, he'd not expected the infernal cult to make its move so soon. In the end, what was that miasma? Conrad's mind connected to Kron, who was in the process of shoving a phantasm orchid down a duke's throat. Kron, did you sense that miasma? Yes, master. Can you explain what it is? Having inherited the Flame Mark's knowledge, Kron currently was the #1 expert on infernal realm matters. And considering how his blood boiled while his Stola's physique felt invigorated, Conrad firmly believed the miasma linked to the infernal realm. Yes, master, but you don't have to worry. This is just a plague sent by Lord Stolas from the infernal realm. I suppose the infernal cult used a tremendous quantity of merit to request such a boon from him. This plague targets the unbelievers among non-demons. The effects are not apparent and will take some time to manifest. Moreover, they often vary depending on cultivation level and Lord Stola's whim. I can't identify the different thresholds, but what's certain is that the bulk of the infected will see their bodies atrophied and their essence sapped to death. Still, considering that the mortal realm significantly suppresses the scope of the higher realm's god's abilities, with its current range that seems to stretch throughout the entire holy continent, I believe it cannot harm high-level cultivators. Semi-saints and above should be safe from all harms. For the rest, I dare not say. Maybe transcendent-level experts can also avoid the calamity. Kron politely replied while shoving the orchid down his target's throat before moving on to the next. Conrad frowned. Stolas was the father of all poisons. Diseases and plagues also felt under his jurisdiction. Although he wasn't one of the 4 kings of hell and couldn't compare to them on cultivation, he ranked high in the infernal hierarchy. And as he considered the future damages, Conrad's eyes widened in fright. You mean to say that at the very least, anyone beneath the transcendent rank is guaranteed death? Yes. Since this is a plague sent by Lord Stolas, unless the Celestial Church cripples their merit reserves to obtain help from the Celestial Realm, once the plague activates, all the intended targets that felt the miasma's touch are condemned to death. Faced with such news, Conrad staggered. Only 1 in 100 can become a cultivator. And among those with the gift, 1 in 1,000 can reach the transcendent rank. The holy continent roughly comprises 50 billion people. Are you telling me that a green breeze is about to wipe out almost 50 billion men and women from the ancient crystal world? Yes. Kron, who didn't care about the lives of those mortals, straightforwardly answered. And while she didn't have access to their exchange, Else could see the distress within Conrad's eyes. With one move, the infernal cult was about to crush all his plans. Still, Conrad didn't lose his composure calm. What about the Celestial Church? Surely, they won't allow all their believers to vanish in such a way. Conrad naturally didn't count on the Celestial Church's kindness. However, every believer carried with him passive merit gains. To protect those merits, the Celestial Church should stop the plague. But this time, it was the system that replied, "It's not worth it." Just like the demon god's powers are suppressed in the mortal realm, so are the Deva gods. Saving is harder than destroying. To save those people, the Celestial Church would basically have to deplete their merit reserves. With a holy war looming on the horizon, that will never happen. On the contrary, they will use their tremendous merit advantage to crush the infernal cult when the war begins. In the celestial church's eyes, semi-saints are enough to mow the land. Only saint-level experts matter in a clash between the two giants. Since their foundation remains unharmed, they will not make a move. Those words only serve to further confuse Conrad. Is the infernal cult ruled by donkeys? Knowing that, how could they make such a mistake? There is nothing to gain. Even if the infernal cult is ruled by donkeys, can the southern king of hell bestow a child upon a Jenny? I refuse to believe that cheap mother of mine would commit such a blunder. If the system could shrug, it would. Unfortunately, it didn't have the shoulders. Only by asking her can you find out. Aren't you getting the right to leave soon? You can use it to question your cheap mother. Black lines flashed on Conrad's forehead. But thinking of the 10th von Jürgen Elder following him, his seriousness returned. I guess we'll have to deal with that one first. Conrad's eyes fell back on Else, who'd already gotten dressed. I suppose you now want to find your mother. Although speaking ill of your savior is unbecoming, I must recommend you wariness. She might have given birth to you, but in her eyes, you're just a means to an end. Your worth solely depends on your abilities. Else cautioned while readjusting her disheveled hairs. Conrad was undisturbed. First, he had no feelings for that cheap mother of his. Second, if she cared about her son's well-being, she wouldn't have forced him into becoming a palace eunuch. However, not caring didn't mean he could face her without preparations. Although I don't know her exact position in the infernal cult, she's surnamed Circer. That alone is enough to remind us of how formidable a background she possesses. Although Conrad didn't have a clear understanding of what the name Circer represented, one exchange with Kron was enough to enlighten him. The Circers are one of the 3 mightiest houses of the infernal cult, and the only one of human blood. The Patriarch Birkencerker is the infernal cult's great elder and ranks among the ancient crystal world's top 5 experts. He's also your maternal grandfather. As for your mother, she's one of their cult war chiefs, tasked with setting the stage for the next holy war. Needless to say, she's very good at her job. But if nothing changed since your departure, her true body remains in the barbarian continent. Chapter 182 Greetings, Mother Part 1. Analyzing the situation, Conrad closed his eyes. While he didn't feel any moral obligation to the holy continent's inhabitants, they'd already turned into the building blocks of his future hegemony. The current main quest required them alive, and even if it didn't, once they perished, he would have no choice besides heading into the barbarian continent unprepared. Could a 1,000,000-years-old force possibly pledge allegiance to a teenaged boy? Impossible. Even if their lips spoke the words, Conrad didn't doubt their hearts would think otherwise. And once they became aware of his current bloodline level, the consequences were hard to fathom. After all, better than anyone, they knew how little the distant Talroth could affect them. Those considerations aside, many of his women were likely to fall to this plague. How is that tolerable? Do you know any way to stop this plague? Conrad asked the system. Well, you can't stop it, but you could, in theory, minimize the effects. Although the Stola's progenitor's cultivation is leagues above this world, the force he can send on this mortal world to cover the holy continent cannot truly reach the god level. With an awakened divine rank Stola's physique and a god's heart as ritual anchor, you could absorb enough miasma to lower its effects. At least, make it so that the higher the cultivation, the longer the plague takes to activate, and that death isn't the final outcome. Perhaps we can restrain it to perpetual sufferings. Nonsense, how is that a solution? And even if I were willing to accept such a poor result, where do I find a god's heart? But as he spoke, Conrad saw a perverse opportunity in those words. Unfortunately, the same problem remained. Throughout the ages, no one had managed to break through godhood within the ancient crystal world. Where then could he find a god's heart? Yo, you asked. We can't do more than that. To nullify this plague, at the very least, you'd need a Stola's god physique. I can't give you that. With a sigh, Conrad disconnected himself from the system. From his connection to the phantasm orchids, he could feel Kron and Margot had already subdued 9 of the 12 dukes. The night was more than enough for them to complete that task. As for the Margraves, Although their cultivation was much weaker, there were many more of them. Kron, once you're done with the dukes, return to my side. Margot will handle the rest. I have another task for you. As you command, master. By the way, if you can, avoid bruising the Schlesinger Duke. He's my wife's brother-in-law, so we gotta give him some face. I guess I can put him in a dream and have him swallow the orchid of his own free will. Good enough. Else vanished, leaving Conrad alone, and free to do as he saw fit. Without further delay, he activated his invisibility skill and flew toward Yvonne's quarters. When the entrance to her chambers flew open without showing any intruding form, Yvonne's lips curled into a smile. Playing hide and seek now? I'm afraid we've passed the age. The door closed, and Conrad's voice echoed. We just need to make the game more mature. Want to try sleeping with the invisible man? I'll pass. A mild chuckle escaped Yvonne's lips, and Conrad appeared by her side. Greetings, my unbridled lady, he said while taking her right hand and planting a soft kiss on its back. Greetings, my lascivious man. With a sudden pull, Yvonne threw Conrad onto her bed, and while holding him down, pushed her lips onto his for an impromptu kiss. And when their kiss broke, Yvonne flicked her tongue around her lips with a mild frown. Female flavor? Lie, I made sure I removed the fragrance before I came, Conrad replied, while flipping Yvonne onto her back to hickey her neck. Incorrigible, their playful romp carried on for a few minutes before they returned to seriousness. I assume you felt that miasma? Lying by Conrad's side, Yvonne nodded, though she couldn't grasp the purpose of that strange miasma, considering how it alarmed her demonic bloodline. It most likely came from infernal sources. Well, apparently. Conrad then enlightened her on both the threat the Holy Continent faced and his mother's origin. Faced with the reality of their new situation, Yvonne was startled. Which is why I will be meeting her tomorrow. This time, once I leave the palace, I cannot say when I will return. Maybe I will be back in a few days, maybe in a month. I'm still gone. Why don't you leave with me? Yvonne shook her head. Once Ulrich realizes my disappearance, people will die in the hundreds or the thousands. You may not be able to tell the difference between a pure self and the true self, but as a true origin saint, Ulrich can. So if we leave, we better take everyone whose lives we remotely care about with us, and not return until we're ready to overthrow him. Conrad naturally understood that truth, but the words still had to leave his tongue. But it's fine because regardless of where you go, I will be with you. Where? The pure self in my pouch? It's not the same. Yvonne chortled and pointed her index toward Conrad's forehead. Here. She then lowered it toward his chest. And here. Regardless of where you go, I will occupy these two places of yours, and you will inhabit mine. Hearing those words, Conrad blinked in disbelief, and instinctively, he seized Yvonne's lips, pulling her into his arms for a night of passion. On the following morning, Conrad presented himself to Ulrich for their last court meeting before his departure. Since I won't be able to guide your cultivation for a while, I'm giving you the formation code. It contains all the basic formation setting rules, and some elementary formations useful until the arch rank. Since you've mastered the runic alphabet, you can use it to lay a solid foundation. When you return, we can practice more advanced formations. Conrad received the massive grimoire, keeping it between his arm and waist. Your team awaits in your quarters. You can go meet them, then leave for the Water Kingdom Alliance. Thank you, Father. I won't disappoint you. With that said, Conrad bowed and took his leave, returning to his mansion. In the main hall, the 10th von Jürgen Elder, a middle-aged-looking paragon spirit, awaited alongside a group of 6 high-level semi-saints and 15 peak stage, transcendent knights. As a von Jürgen Jr., Conrad greeted the 10th Elder with a polite bow but was royally ignored. I still have some things to pack. Everyone please give me a minute, Conrad said, undisturbed, and entered his cultivation chamber to take his full traveling bag. Kron then appeared by his side. Take my eunuch appearance and lead those men to the Water Kingdom Alliance. On the road, use the orchids within this bag to subdue them all. If for whatever reason I need you to return early, I shall contact you. Kron nodded, taking the bag into his hands and assuming Conrad's eunuch appearance. Master, since that 10th elder disrespected you, should I torture him a little bit? At your discretion. Kron thus resolved to give the 10th elder the thrashing of a lifetime. To avoid suspicion, Conrad left him with his Imperial Duke artifacts and activated his invisibility skill, leaving the palace to head toward the red light district his predecessor had grown up in. It was time to meet his mother. Chapter 183 Greetings, Mother Part 2. As Conrad stepped into the red light district, a faint dark mist snuck up on him and trailed him from the side while he bypassed the sea of people. Although the area didn't see much activity in broad daylight, there was still a substantial amount of lost causes that couldn't resist the temptation. But as he crossed a desolated alley leading to his mother's brothel, Conrad stopped in his tracks. All right, show yourself. Having kept his origin sight activated, he could see the faint, dark mist on his heels. However, since his demonic senses couldn't detect any ill intent from it, he didn't pay it much attention. The dark mist expanded into a full-blown dark fog, then morphed to assume a riveting figure Conrad knew very well. Yvonne? Yvonne stood before him with her lips flashing an enthralling smile. Congratulations, husband. Your semen is truly incomparably nutritious and helped me accelerate my recovery process. This morning, I returned to the early stage of the profound saint rank. This is my second pure self. Black lines flashed on Conrad's forehead. I didn't know you to be so shameless. I learned from the best. Yvonne gave the humble bow of disciple to master. Conrad stifled a laugh and rubbed his beardless chin. Oh well, your nectar is not half bad either. My cultivation made great strides toward the 7th step of the Transcendent Knight rank and the 9th step of the Transcendent Priest ranks. Once I seclude myself to fully digest the gains, a breakthrough is inevitable. That is natural. You are privy to the world's #1 garden. As long as you're diligent, prosperity is yours. Yvonne brazenly replied while putting a bronze mask on her face and stepping toward Conrad's side. He offered her his arm, and without hesitation, she took it. Let's hope this shameless couple of ours receives mother's blessings. Thus, arm in arm, they carried on toward Guliston's brothel. Shortly after passing the door, an overly eager procuress welcomed them. Conrad ignored her, letting his eyes sweep the brothel where several guests were currently being entertained by the prostitutes. The place echoed with many memories his previous self found rather unpleasant. Lord, please step inside. Here we have all flavors and will definitely leave you begging for him. Huh, do I know you? Initially, the middle-aged procuress had begun her speech by looking at attire rather than face. Using clothing to determine the depth of pockets, she assumed she got herself a big fish. After all, Conrad especially dressed in a luxurious blue silk robe to give the air of a wealthy young master. That added to the lady by his side who, though masked, showcased fascinating curves, convinced the procuress of the accuracy of her choice. However, as her eyes rose to meet his, though the purple orbs and perfectly muscled physique didn't match anything in her memories, the face was rather familiar. In an instant, she superposed the images of the previous Conrad and the current one. But, as the thought echoed within her mind, the procuress immediately dismissed it. How could that adorable pretty boy match the tyrannical Adonis before her? Conrad's eyes lowered onto the 15 centimeters shorter procuress. Browsing through his previous self's memories, he recalled her as one of the ladies that caused the previous Conrad's fear of women. Confused by his half-incubus scent, she'd almost forced herself on him and would have succeeded were it not for his loyal cat defending him. Still, like all the rest, she could never conceal that voracious gaze his scent produced in her, thus traumatizing the lad. However, Conrad didn't have time to waste on this level of goods. Tell the Burgundy lady that she has a customer. His voice echoed like an inviolable order that forced the procuress out of her stupor. Instantaneously, she turned heels and rushed upstairs to find the Burgundy lady. Meanwhile, all eyes fell upon the dreamlike pair that just passed the entrance. As if drawn by a magnet, the ladies couldn't pull their gazes from Conrad, ogling him with soaring desires and floundering as they resisted the urge to pounce onto him. Thankfully, he'd restrained his orchid scent. Otherwise, the consequences were hard to fathom. As for the drunken men, a mixture of rage and thirst flashed within their eyes as they went between the mesmerizing Yvonne and the statuesque Conrad. Several were ready to cause trouble, but before they could rise from their seats to spout drivel, Conrad raised his hand, forcing all the onlookers to face the other way and preventing them from shifting their gazes back onto the couple. Startled by this sudden display of might, they shivered within their seats, not daring to make a rash move to avoid provoking a calamity. "Petty," Yvonne commented in an amused tone. "You're absolutely right," Conrad approved with a firm head nod. At that time, the procuress returned, and this time, she brought with her a burgundy-clad beauty endowed with the longest hairs Conrad had seen in his life. So long, in fact, that they reached her ankles and almost brushed the ground. At a glance, with her olive skin tone that reminded him of Zamira's and stood out within the holy continent, Conrad could see that she hailed from the barbarian continent. Her eyes rose to meet his, and although no cultivation was discernible from her body, Yvonne, who stood by Conrad's side, immediately turned serious. "Welcome, young master. Please allow this humble servant to entertain you." Guliston's mellifluous voice echoed, teasing the ears of the listeners. But for some reason, Conrad found it grating. The feeling didn't belong to him, but stemmed from his previous self's lingering resentment. "Good. If this young master is pleased with your job, this young master will reward you." Conrad swept his left sleeve, and with Yvonne still at his right, climbed the stairs to access the second floor where Guliston entertained her guests. Seeing Conrad's indifferent gaze, Guliston's smile brightened, and turning heels, she caught up to him, leading the way back toward her business chambers. "Young master, are you sure you want to bring your lady with you? After all, she might not be pleased with what we'll do inside." The words caused no ripple on Conrad's face. "My lady is broad-minded and willing to accompany me throughout all endeavors. You don't need to worry about her." Guliston nodded and said nothing further, leading the two into her room. There, she helped the couple toward their seats before bringing in 2 jugs. "Tea or booze?" Guliston asked while waving the 2 jugs in Conrad's face. With a wave of his hand, Conrad soundproofed the room. "You can cut the act. It never suited you." "Greetings, mother," Conrad replied, dismissing the 2 jugs while keeping his eyes locked on Guliston's. Her lips flew into an O shape while her eyes widened in glaring disbelief. "Young master, look at you. Look at me. How could such a big fella possibly come out of me? I'm afraid you wouldn't fit." Beneath her bronze mask, Yvonne was startled. Meanwhile, Conrad's lips curled into a smile. "How do you know about that?" "We won't know until we try," Conrad unabashedly replied. Chapter 184 Greetings, Mother Part 3. For a short instant, Guliston blinked in surprise. Clearly, she'd not expected such brazen words to pass Conrad's lips. "You're even more shameless than I last checked." "Impressive." Setting 2 cups before them, she poured them tea, then set the jugs aside to settle in the opposite seat. "It's a special beverage. Useless for the pure self by your side, but very helpful in meridian condensation. Have a taste," Guliston explained, her tone having returned to seriousness. After examining the beverage through the system and making sure nothing wrong existed within, Conrad's eyes shifted back toward Guliston, not sipping it still. That she could see through the difference between pure and true self was no surprise. However, she could also see through his cultivation, an impossible feat for saint-level experts unless he allowed them to. And he didn't. Therefore, Conrad could conclude that Guliston's cultivation was at the divine level. But what rank in particular, he couldn't say. "Can you see through her cultivation?" he asked the system while they exchanged silent glances. "Well, this is just a divine incarnation. It doesn't really have cultivation of its own and draws power from the main body. Therefore, I can't estimate her true cultivation level. But in any case, she can probably pinch anyone you've met so far between 2 fingers. The system replied to Conrad's dismay. Afraid the tea is poisoned? Not really, I'm just surprised. You're not exactly an example of motherly love. Are you sure you want to waste such resources on me? Conrad's serious tone showed no jest. Doubting Guliston's intent was natural. After all, his previous self had gone through untold sufferings in her hands. From getting thrown into a snake pit to being cast out in the city's outskirts to fend for himself, there was no abuse he'd not endured. Now suddenly she was offering top-level goods? Showing some wariness was inevitable. Conrad's words drew a sigh from Guliston's scarlet lips. Conrad, between you and I, there are many misunderstandings. Allow me to clear things up. All playfulness vanished from Guliston's eyes as she stared into Conrad's. Before, you were a useless piece of trash. I mistreated you, hoping to stimulate you, but to no avails. That being case, your life mattered little, though getting boned by your father was, and will always be the most pleasurable event of my life. I didn't go through the ordeals of 9 months of pregnancy to raise a waste. Yvonne's eyes contorted into a frown. Even in her centuries-long existence, rarely had she ever seen such implacable candor. You were not born from 2 loving parents romping under the sunset. You were born because I convinced my father to grant me the opportunity to almost deplete the merit quotas of House Circer while sacrificing thousands of worthy lives for the sake of summoning Lord Talroth into this world and obtain his blessing. I got all I wanted. Therefore, you were an additional price, not a boon. A burden, not a glory. Yvonne's frown deepened. However, Conrad's indifference remained, as if the words couldn't affect him. At first, when His Majesty made giving birth to and raising you to godhood the price of his blessings, I thought you would be a double opportunity. On the one hand, I could lay down the foundation for my rapid ascension and have my house become the mightiest of the ancient crystal world. On the other hand, I could raise a lethal weapon to bring down the celestial church once and for all. Imagine my disappointment when I realized your demonic and human bloodlines repelled one another, and imagine my frustration when I recalled I must raise you into godhood to fulfill my end of the bargain. Although she spoke of disappointment and frustration, Guliston's face never showed any emotion. The pressure was not small. Do you know the fundamental difference between barbarian houses and holy continent houses? Conrad shook his head. Therefore, Guliston carried on. In the barbarian continent, birth order and genders matter not. The heirs and rulers are always the strongest of their generation. We rule by might, and House Circer takes this to another level. At birth, regardless of the parent's background, all children are submitted to a bloodline and talent assessment. Although bloodline is the foundation, only the height of talent really matters. Children are then given numbers and ranks depending on their talents. Then, matching resources are allocated. How high do you think your talent was? Conrad's lips curled into an amused smile. Couldn't have been very high. Guliston shook her head. 0. Because your bloodlines repelled one another, we couldn't assess any talent. This made no sense because while the Circer blood is mighty within this world, it can never hold a candle to Lord Talroth's. Later, I realized he purposely lowered the intensity of the blood you inherited from him during the contract to make sure the 2 bloodlines would fight for dominion, thus making you unable to cultivate. I broke all house rules to give you the best baptisms, hoping to stimulate your demonic blood to take dominion over the human one, but to no avail. Needless to say, you quickly became our house's shame, the first waste in House Circer's 1 million years of history. My waste son. Conrad burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. There is nothing funny about this. Sorry. Please continue. Is that why you cast me into the holy continent? Guliston crossed her legs and leaning back, shook her head. All hope was not lost. As long as you could awaken your lineage mark, it would help the demonic blood take precedence over the human one. But awakening the lineage mark depends solely on disposition. Therefore, while my main body worked on our next project, I brought you here to make you experience enough difficulties for you to bring forth the power of your lineage mark. Alas, alas, my disposition was the worst of my traits. I grew up into a meek, submissive boy that avoided trouble like the plague and had no interest in women. The lineage mark requiring a passionate and domineering disposition, I could never activate it. Conrad replied, finishing Guliston's words. Right. Therefore, I quickly lost hope. I was on the verge of selling you to slave traders when else offered to instead take you into the palace as a eunuch. I agreed, on the condition that she didn't interfere with your castration process. Otherwise, I'd sell you anyways. Conrad's smile broadened, while Yvonne's scowl reached the limits of what her face could endure. Excuse me? You emphasized that she didn't stop it? Naturally, otherwise wasn't this just a vacation? What could we possibly gain? Now here you are, finally able to live up to my expectations. We can start working. Now knowing the crux of the matter, Conrad couldn't help but pity his previous self. I'm curious, what would you have done if I died? The contract stipulates that if I can't bring you to godhood, I must pay back with either my life or house circles. I would naturally not destroy my house because of my own failings. Therefore, I would have killed myself. The straightforward answer brought an approving nod from Conrad, who then turned toward Yvonne that sat by his side. Beloved, what do you think of your mother-in-law? Conrad inquired in a joking tone. Worse than the two of us combined, Yvonne directly replied, and Conrad agreed. All three of them were malevolent existents that could in a heartbeat harm hundreds if it suited their purposes. However, Guliston was a step above. In her immovable eyes, Conrad saw only three things: pride, house duty, and ambition. Genuine affection had no place in there. Worse, if need be, she could be as cruel to herself as she was to others. Now that the introductions are out of the way, let's discuss how you plan to make me the ancient crystal world's first deity. Later. First, I need to introduce you to someone. Guliston replied with a smile, then clapped her hands. Clap, clap, clap. The door didn't budge, and in a golden haze, three figures appeared within the room. The cloaked messenger, the cloaked girl, and Guliston's nephew. Conrad, allow me to do the presentations. On the left is my favorite butler, a Star Connection Saint rank expert. You can count on him in all matters. The Circer butler dropped onto his knees in a show of deference. Greetings, young master. In the middle is one of your cousins, Ison Circer. He currently holds the rank of 7th inheritor and is my elder brother's third son. Though half your previous crown prince's age, his cultivation has already reached the late stage of the rising saint rank and approaches the peak. Son of God, greetings. Ison said in a polite bow and a tone that hardly hid his contempt. Both Conrad and Yvonne could feel the disdain in his words. However, Guliston acted as if she didn't. On the right is Diana, the consort I prepared for you. She was chosen before your birth and is younger by a few months. Nurtured in the womb and then raised by my main body in the barbarian continent to become the most perfect of dual cultivation partners you can find throughout the ancient crystal world. You are free to do with her as you see fit. Diana politely bowed toward Conrad but said nothing. Meanwhile, a cold glint flashed within Ison's eyes. Was it not for you previously being unable to cultivate, you should have long since sampled her? Oh, but I'm just 17. How long ago was I supposed to sample her? Conrad asked in renewed amusement. Oh, 17, 14, 12. As long as you can get it up, who cares? Chapter 185 Graced because I exist. Yvonne and Conrad were left speechless while the trio on the side remained undisturbed, used to Guliston's habits. Impressive, Conrad commented after a moment of respite. His eyes didn't linger on Diana, instead shifting back toward his disdainful cousin for a brief instant before returning onto his mother. The presentations are done. Now, can we discuss serious affairs? The butler can stay, but the rest should leave. This kind of occurrence was the exact reason why Conrad didn't trust the infernal cult. Of the three people presented, though all were of the same family, the butler was the only loyal one. The cousin was a snake waiting to bare his fangs, while that Diana, though cloaked and showing proper decorum, clearly didn't have any reverence toward him. Conrad didn't lack beauties. Meanwhile, talent was adjustable. Therefore, to the current him, she held minimal appeal. However, his words caused the other four's eyes to flash with various reactions. Guliston's smile broadened. The butler was startled. Ison's chilling gaze became more obvious, and Diana frowned. "Oh, why is that?" Guliston asked, pretending not to see through Conrad's thoughts. And before he could reply, Ison's voice echoed. "Yes, little cousin. I'm also curious to hear why. After all, we're one big family. What is it that you need to talk about that we can't hear?" He sneered, and his eyes bypassed Conrad to land on Yvonne. Though her bronze mask hid her face and prevented him from seeing through her cultivation, it couldn't conceal her luscious curves and the sex appeal Ison had rarely seen in his life. Although House Circer was a family of dual cultivators and possessed a plethora of beauties, those of Yvonne's level were hard to find. Moreover, her bearing that didn't put the world in her eyes particularly aroused him. This was the type he enjoyed subduing the most. "Cousin, it's not fair. You've just returned that aunt bestowed an unparalleled beauty onto you. So, you can't be stingy. At the very least, you should let your older cousin sample this woman of yours. Maybe I can teach her a few tricks to better serve you in bed." Hearing such words, the butler was startled. But before he could say anything, Guliston stopped him through a mental message. A mental message that made the butler take Ison into pity. Though reckless, Ison would never dare openly shame his aunt's son if he'd not gotten her approval beforehand. When he inquired on her stance regarding playing with that daughter-in-law, she only said one thing: "Do as you see fit and bear the consequences." Clearly, she wanted to use him to test Conrad. That being the case, how could he not use the opportunity to see some benefits and vent some spleen? At least, he should carry a beauty to bed. However, used to having the world bend before him, he'd not expected his words to trigger a violent outburst from the pair. Yvonne said nothing but gathered her holy force for a crippling palm strike. But before she could attack, Conrad's grip stopped her. And sensing the furor that seethed within his veins, she no longer carried on. After all, in this particular moment, even if she wiped the floor with Ison, Conrad couldn't recover his dignity. Seeing him restrain Yvonne but not make a move, Ison assumed Conrad dreaded the Circer name, and therefore carried on. "You know, it is common courtesy to exchange gifts on first meetings. I'm the one that brought the girl straight from the barbarian continent for you to enjoy. For your sake, I left my life of splendor to dive into this backwater shithole. Therefore, you should reciprocate. Letting a brother taste your girl is nothing. I'm sure after I throw her a few holy artifacts, she'll beg F." Before Ison could react, Conrad's right foot kicked him in the crotch, hauling him up to crash against the ceiling above. Bang! Ison's world spun, and his head lodged itself in the ceiling, making the onlooker only able to see what lied beneath his neck. Guliston gave a nod of approval. But Conrad was only getting started. Before Ison could recover from his compromising position, Conrad yanked his right leg and, pulling him out of the ceiling, smashed him onto Guliston's side of the wooden table. The table split in two with Yvonne's side spiraling toward Guliston. The tea flew onto the ground while Guliston's eyes widened before this naked show of disrespect. But before the table and wooden debris could reach her, they vanished into nothingness. Bang, bang, bang. Conrad consecutively slammed Ison 3 times onto the ground before tossing him aside like a rag doll. His eyes then fell back onto Guliston's. "You even dare compare this waist to the previous crown prince? Good. Allow me to be blunt. Be it the first or second von Jürgen prince, both are leagues above that waist nephew of yours in talent, mental, and disposition. Were it not for him having the resources of a mighty house, he could never hold a candle to them. If this is House Circer's 7th inheritor, Clearly, your clan has set foot onto the road of decline and is not far from destruction, Conrad declared, and as Ison struggled to stand, he sent him back onto the ground with a kick into his teeth. As for you, make me a god? With just you? How laughable. If the Circer were capable of producing a deity, I would not be the first one. You think too highly of yourself, and I certainly have no interest in playing your games. Spoken bluntly, you are just another one of House Tauratha's maidservants. An expendable house slave with low status and an uncertain future. Graced because I exist. Even the lowest of concubines knows she must treasure whatever child she gets from her monarch, because only then can she obtain glory. But you? Clearly, your wits don't match a lowly concubine's. Conrad made a grasping motion, and trapped by telekinetic power, Ison's bloodied form flew back toward him, and with another brutal punch, he shoved him into the adjacent wall. If I say they need to leave, then they leave. Who gave you the right to question me? A servant with a shotgun is still a servant. It is your life that depends on me. Your glory that relies on me, not the other way around. Ison's body slid back toward him, and Conrad trampled his skull under his right foot. Yvonne aside, the other three were startled. Even Gulistan, who'd seen much of his prowess, hadn't expected his strength to reach such a dreadful level. Although from her intel, she expected a clash between them to result in Conrad's victory, this was utterly absurd. Conrad was just a high-level transcendent rank expert. But Ison was a saint. Although he was taken by surprise, this show of strength was incomprehensible. But through Conrad's murderous eyes and chilling words, Gulistan realized that using Ison in this particular manner was a terrible mistake. That Yvonne's worth in his eyes had already surpassed her expectations. She waved her hand, causing the scenery to change and the six of them to reappear into a vast, empty dark blue world. Ignoring Conrad's remarks, she teleported herself and the other three bystanders several miles away, leaving ample place for a battle she knew was only getting started. Having spoken such words, I hope you can live up to them, Gulistan said undisturbed, and as if echoing her words, dazzling golden light erupted from the sole of Conrad's foot, propelling him backward. As Conrad recovered his stance, Ison stood up with a badly beaten and bloodied face backed with crazed eyes that demanded Conrad's life. I will kill you, Ison roared, and 9 white pairs of energy wings appeared at his back while a saint ring formed above his head. Within it, a lotus bloomed, bringing alongside it vast holy force. Empowered by the golden light swirling around him, the current Ison could easily defeat the average early-stage profound saint. He stretched out his hand, summoning a mid-grade holy longsword which he raised before shooting toward Conrad at full force. With that artifact in hand, Ison dared fight late-stage, profound saints. But as he approached him, Conrad sneered. Thinking that your pathetic golden human blood is enough to disrespect a true demon. Preposterous. Purple light burst from Conrad's body alongside massive violet flames, while his eyes shone with the same color. You are not killing me, I am killing you. Awaken, and bring my enemies onto their knees. Manbreaker. In an explosion of violet flames, an infernal, spiked, jet-black warhammer engraved with purple veins appeared within Conrad's right hand and glittered with terrible demonic might. Bang! Startled by Manbreaker's descent, Ison attempted to abort his assault, but before he could, Conrad's lineage weapon smashed into his holy sword and barreled into his chest to send him spiraling into the air with a massive eruption of blood. Now it was Yvonne's turn to be startled. Although she now possessed a lineage weapon and understood their might, Conrad's was clearly much more powerful than hers. But when she recalled how lineage weapons grew alongside the bloodline level, her surprise vanished. Chapter 186 I Lied. Diana, who witnessed Ison's thrashing, found the word surprise not enough to describe her stupor. Back in House Circer, she'd heard many things about Conrad, none painting him in a good light. More than a true godson, most saw him as the cruel joke Tauroth played on House Circer. Therefore, she didn't come with many expectations and carried concealed grievances. However, she could never disrespect Guliston's will. And now, she was reminded of why the wise saw hearsay as reality's detractor. How was this a waste? Clearly, this was a young hegemon. Although compared to the infernal cult's top experts under the age of 300, there still was a tremendous gap. That was because his cultivation level and age couldn't compare to theirs. In 10 years, forget about the younger generation. Diana didn't doubt that even the elders would face countless hardships. By the time he reached the divine rank, who could suppress him? As I thought, his bloodline has reached a dreadful level. Otherwise, his lineage weapon couldn't be this mighty. But how does he do it? Increasing bloodline levels is a nigh impossible task. Either you contract a higher-level demon, or you steal and refine a better bloodline. Either is impossible. Did Lord Tauroth play another trick? Or did he know? That makes no sense. Unless this was Taurith's doing, the only third possibility Guliston could think of was bloodline atavism. However, not only were the required resources humongous, but atavism retraced a precise ancestor's blood. Tauroth was Conrad's only demonic ancestor. If atavism were the answer, then Conrad would now be an incubus primogen with abilities defying all mortal understanding. He clearly wasn't. But as Guliston analyzed the possibilities, she realized the source mattered little. Hopefully, Ison can bring out his entire arsenal. I'm curious to see how deep his foundation is. From the moment she'd given Ison permission to offend Conrad, Guliston's main body had already revoked his 7th inheritor position. As long as he could butcher him, Conrad would take his place. The elders had long since agreed that the position needed a better candidate, and faced with Conrad's current talent, they would certainly welcome him with open arms. Now, whether he wanted it or not was another story. Meanwhile, Ison's beating carried on. Suppressed by Manbreaker's tyrannical powers, he could not resist the onslaught, and unable to shoulder the infernal weapon's cruel hammering, Ison surrendered to his battering. Manbreaker slammed into his face, its spikes digging past his flesh and bones to send him crashing onto the ground. Frankly spoken, Conrad had nothing against Guliston and even somehow admired her. And since he came to understand the true nature of the plague, he was ready to swallow some spleen. In any case, just like Ulrich said, "Whoever disrespects me, even if I can't kill him today, I will kill him tomorrow." On the road to amass supreme power, enduring small offenses was nothing. However, insulting his woman was an offense he could never tolerate. In Ison's case, there was no need to wait tomorrow. He could kiss his Manbreaker-made coffin and die today. Bang! Ison tumbled with his limbs outstretched and his spine shattering. Gaping holes and bloody cracks appeared within his face, while blood gushed from his lips and torso wounds. However, as the golden light swirling around him flashed, the wounds began healing at breakneck speed, and again, he stood up. Conrad frowned. Human bloodlines were ranked by color and were from lowest to highest. Discolored blood, blue blood, silver blood, jade blood, purple blood, and golden blood. As long as they weren't killed in the cradle, golden-blooded humans all possessed the potential to reach the divine rank in a lifetime. It was rumored that one bloodline existed above the golden level and triggered a race transformation which turned humans into beings comparable to the highest demons and devas. However, that legend was never proven true in the ancient crystal world. As a golden-blooded human, Ison's innate talent truly stood at the pinnacle of the ancient crystal world. However, Conrad was undisturbed. The full might of his meridians erupted alongside a large array of rainbow-colored light that covered the perimeter and enfeebled his enemy. Seeing that rainbowed light, Ison's eyes widened in fright. Miraculous transcendence? Although Ison had witnessed absolute transcendence, to him, miraculous transcendence was just a legend. Something lost alongside the founders, never to reappear within their world. Why then was that force descending onto him? Rage and unwillingness shone within his bloodshot eyes as he recalled the origin of Conrad's miraculous transcendence. If you were not the child of a god, you wouldn't be worth anything. Ison spat in indignation, and hearing those words, Gulistan, Yvonne, the butler, and Diana showed various signs of disapproval. Conrad sneered. If you were not surnamed Circer, I know hundreds that could walk all over you. But you are. Fate is the foundation of all beings within the universe. Purple light and lightning burst from Conrad's form as dozens of his afterimages descended upon Ison. Chaos ring. Ison stretched out his arms, causing a dark circle to appear around him and repel Conrad's assault. Bang! Conrad flew back, somersaulting to return on his feet. The chaos attribute within this ring was something Conrad had never dealt with, a force encompassing both positive and negative energies. Seeing Conrad unable to break through his ring, Ison's smugness returned. Unlike the holy continent wastes, House Circer has long since conceived a supreme art to vanquish all the flaws within dual cultivation and turn it into the ultimate weapon. Gender matters not. As long as you face our chaos attribute, you must bend. Just like Heed had just said, Conrad could feel his vital energy suppressed by the chaos ring surrounding Ison. The lotus above his head bloomed, morphing into a perfect Ison replica that reappeared by his side. This was his pure self. Together, their battle power multiplied, and alongside his power leap, Ison's confidence soared. Did you really think you could so effortlessly trample an infernal cult saint? Blame yourself for being too conceited. The two Isons joined their left and right hands, then in tandem proclaimed, 6 circle spell, chaos splendor. 6 dark circles appeared and swirled around them. The chaos ring expanded, then imploded in chaotic particles that again merged to release a dreadful explosion of chaos forces. In a deafening blast, the chaos force explosion barreled into Conrad, creating an obscure field from which no life could be detected. If such a spell were released in the outside world, unless a saint was ready to stop it, it would easily lay waste to an entire city. Self-satisfied, Ison turned his gaze away from Conrad's resting place to face Gulistan and greet her with a polite bow. Aunt, my apologies. I couldn't restrain my strength. Hopefully, you won't blame me. Gulistan sighed, a sigh Ison thought aimed at Conrad's loss. Again, his complacence rose. And this time, he shifted his attention onto Diana. Since he'd laid eyes on her, he was determined to make her his. With Conrad now out of the way, his desire would soon become a reality. How could he not feel elated? But if he could find reason in his kinsman's reactions, Yvonne surprised him. A glaring sneer plastered her face. A sneer that seemed aimed at him? How could that be? Or was she sneering at Conrad, who overestimated himself? That should be so. Hee. Clearly, the beauty is now willing to be more responsive to my kind intentions. This night will be entertained. But as Ison driveled, the smoke dispersed, revealing a scene as mesmerizing as it was shocking. Seeing the gazes that bypassed him, Ison turned to face what grabbed their attention and was startled to see Conrad standing unharmed with Manbreaker leaning on his right shoulder while his left hand rested on his waist. 6 towering peach blossom trees swirled around him alongside thousands of rose petals to form a protective force field. Nature attribute? No, not possible. The essence is different. In the end, what cultivation method does he practice? Why are all his attributes so strange? But as Ison pondered those issues, he realized the situation was taking a turn for the worse. Dozens of purple vines sprang from the ground to trap his arms and feet. As soon as they locked onto him, an eldritch force sneaked into his body to sap his vital energies. Immediately, Ison was terrified, and his eyes widened in horror. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't free himself. He could only watch Conrad leisurely step toward him, helpless before his imminent demise. Conrad stopped 3 inches before him and shook his head in disapproval. A pity that a future sage will perish in such a manner. Hearing those words, Ison's fright skyrocketed, and his entire body trembled. Did Conrad really dare kill him? Wait. My father is at the peak of the star-fusing saint rank, half-step into the divine seed rank. If you kill me, he'll definitely avenge me. Moreover, my grandfather is a late-stage divine transformation stage expert, standing at the summit of the entire world. Killing me, no one can save you. Fearing death approach, Ison attempted to coerce Conrad through his mighty background. However, Conrad instead burst into laughter. Your grandfather is my grandfather. Between a waste grandson that cannot hold up to a transcendent rank junior and the #1 talent in the history of the ancient crystal world, who will he choose? You know that better than I do. Thinking of how callous a man his grandfather was, Ison despaired. Please, spare me, and say something. I'm your nephew. Ison wailed, but Gulistan didn't spare him a glance. She can force her flesh and blood, the child she nurtured for 9 months, into castration. Do you think a useless nephew will receive her protection? If you want to live, just answer this. Do you have a wife? Huh. Taken aback by this sudden question, Ison didn't know how to reply. Conrad's gaze chilled. Do you have a wife? Yes or no? If you do, I will spare you. The seriousness of Conrad's tone convinced Ison that this was his only road to survival. Therefore, he promptly replied, Yes, yes. I have one official wife, 8 concubines and 17 cauldrons. Good. Very good. In the future, when I plow the fields of House Circer, I will give them twice the love, in memory of you. Then without further ado, Conrad raised his hammer above Ison's head, preparing it for the final blow. But you said. I lied. Bang. Ison's skull shattered under Conrad's descending hammer blow, and torn by the spiked weapon. His body split into 2 gruesome parts, leaving an eruption of blood and gore to drench Conrad's form. Chapter 187, Mortal Realm Godhood Requirement Part 1. By the time Ison's body parts dropped onto the ground, Conrad had already straightened his back. In a twister of purple flames, Manbreaker vanished from his hand, leaving the gruesome mess on the ground, and the blood drenching him to remind the onlooker of his clash's brutality. His eyes fell on Ison's left arm. Around it hanged an emerald bracelet which after analysis turned out to be a space treasure. As they say, to the victor the spoil. Within the Holy Continent's secular world, a rising saint equipped with a mid-grade holy artifact was a ridiculous thought. Even the Holy Flame Empire that stood at the helm of the secular world couldn't equip its rising saints with such treasures. Artifacts were classified through star levels. 1 to 3 was the low grade, 4 to 6 the mid-grade, and 7th to 9 the high grade. Ison's sword was a 4-star holy artifact. At full strength, comparable to a fate wrestling saint in might. Although with his cultivation level, he clearly couldn't make full use of it, it still greatly empowered him. House Circer's profound wealth was thus evident. Who knew what wondrous things hid in that bracelet? Even if Conrad had no use for them, the same couldn't be said for his ladies. With a grasping motion, the emerald space bracelet flew toward him and landed within his left palm. Conrad swept its insides through his transcendent sense and was pleased to see Ison's inheritance substantial. This good cousin really didn't come empty-handed. One person carrying 600,000 holy crystals. Let's not even mention the imperial family. Whether the church still possesses this much in reserves is a matter of debate. Conrad sighed. In terms of holy crystals alone, Ison, a rising saint, was wealthier than the entire imperial family. If the news spread, Ulrich would certainly spit blood. Besides crystals, there still was 6 low-grade holy artifacts and 2 of the mid-grade. As for pills and elixirs, there weren't many. After all, besides restorative pills and elixirs, the rest were meant for consumption, not storage. Still, several holy rank pills and elixirs stood within the lot. Conrad didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ison was clearly a walking state treasury. Compared to him, he really was a poor devil. After resolving to plunder other countries to fill his pockets, Conrad placed a drop of blood onto the bracelet, marking its ownership, then turned toward Yvonne, who eyed him with an amused look. With a step, he appeared before her. "How did you find the show, my lady?" Conrad asked in a joking tone. "Imposing, almost arousing. You didn't lose your face as number one scoundrel under the heavens. I liked." Yvonne replied in the same manner, and Conrad graced her with a theatrical bow. "At your service, my lady. The good man even saw fit to fund your dower. In the future, when I officially ask father-in-law for your hand, I will have more confidence." Seeing the pair acting as if only the two of them remained, Diana frowned. Although she'd been introduced as his prime consort from the beginning, Conrad barely spared her a glance. Granted, she still remained cloaked, but with her natural aura and charm, who could disregard her so? Meanwhile, Gulistan inwardly cursed Ison's uselessness. Besides the lineage weapon and cultivation method, he couldn't bring out anything from Conrad. Forget about his true demon form, he couldn't even force him to release the power of his physiques. How then could she complete her assessment? What a deplorable sight. That waste lost all the family's face. Oh well, I suppose he can't be blamed. Even I didn't expect such prowess. In any case, the stronger, the better. Dismissing her dismay, Gulistan waved her hand, bringing the group back into her business quarters. Her gaze then fell upon Conrad, and with another wave of her hand, she vaporized the blood, drenching him. Her lips then curled into a contented smile. "Congratulations on your victory. Your foundation is already unparalleled in this world's history. That much is a fact. Perhaps you could even surpass the infernal cult founder in his youth. However, at the end of the day, all this is merely potential. You can crush low-level saints, but what about tribulation stage saints? What about star-taming stage saints? Even in this country, there are still several that can effortlessly take your life. Your cultivation is still low." Conrad didn't disagree. If he truly went all out, relying on his physiques, his true demon form and manbreaker, he was now confident that he could face Ulrich in battle. However, victory and defeat were hard to estimate. And that was only if he didn't use his holy flame seal. But even Ulrich still had several individuals to be wary of within the empire. People like the head exarch Gerhard, the dowager, Amalia, the eldest of House von Jürgen Adelwin, and the winged serpent lord, Hubert could behead him without much effort. Still, Conrad had no doubt that long before he achieved sainthood, he would surpass them all. Seeing his unfazed look, Gulistan carried on. "Also, you call me an expendable house slave. That is correct. But don't forget, I'm Tauratha's expendable house slave. He can look down on me, but you're still far from having that right. Moreover, the rules to achieve godhood in the mortal realm are different from the higher realms. Here, talent and resources are secondary. Before even mentioning all the requirements in Foundation, we need to speak of the unbreakable rule. And considering that I only discovered it from your father, I assume you don't know it either." As Gulistan spoke, Yvonne, Diana, and the butler's eyes shone with expectations. Even Conrad's curiosity was piqued. After all, although he could gain that information from Kron or the system, he was too far from godhood to bother researching such specifics. For now, establishing the most perfect of foundations was his priority. Of course, he didn't say no to free enlightenment. Satisfied with their reactions, Gulistan carried on. In the celestial or infernal realm, relying on talent, foundation, and resources, you can freely cultivate to godhood. However, in the mortal realm, no matter how gifted, you can never become a god unless you master the entirety of your world's faith power. No matter how small or big it might be, you first need to become the sole worshipped existence within your world to have a shot at godhood. For that reason, otherworldly talents such as the infernal and celestial founders for whom godhood should have just been the beginning could never become deities after falling into the ancient crystal world. As soon as Gulistan's words ended, Conrad, Yvonne, Diana, and the butler saw their eyes widening in disbelief. "That's impossible." The butler stammered before anyone else could comment, and even Yvonne found his words hard to argue with. Although she possessed boundless confidence in Conrad, the concept of monotheism was something she couldn't fathom. Since the dawn of times, from the earliest civilizations, the ancient crystal world had always been split in two great faiths, each with their own pantheon. The celestial church primarily worshipped the five cardinal lords, while the infernal cult prioritized the four kings of hell. But besides those, there still were many worshipped deities. How could they possibly uproot all those faiths? Chapter 188, Mortal Realm Godhood Requirement Part 2. No, it's possible, and I've already set the plan in motion. Therefore, Conrad, as long as you listen to me, you're doomed to become this world's ruler. World gods are different from the average higher realm deity. Because of the inherent difficulty of polishing a godly foundation in a mortal world, their talent doesn't lose out to the higher realm's elite. Moreover, with the faith power of billions empowering them, their battle power is leagues above the average god at the same level. As a matter of fact, besides invincible deities like the kings of hell, not many can contend with a world god at the same level. I need your help to fulfill my end of the bargain and receive additional boons. You need my help to reach that altitude. Gulistan declared, the rippling confidence within her jet-black eyes clear for all to see. Between the two of us, there may be no genuine mother-son relationship, but with our aligning goals, why can't we become our most trusted partners? Though the words sounded like honey, Conrad remained undisturbed. Is what she says correct? He asked the system while keeping his eyes focused on his interlocutor. Indeed. When you reach a certain level in the main quest, you should obtain your own gate to the higher realms. Therefore, you can ignore her words and once ready, head to the infernal realm to carry on with your cultivation. However, if you do that, you can forget about your dreams of supremacy. At the very least, you'll never catch up to your father in a lifetime. The Flameark's categoric statement caused a frown to form on Conrad's face. Not just Tauroth, the mightiest gods of the infernal realm are all race primogens, born deities, straight from the essence of hell, at various moments in history. They have cultivated for either millions or billions of years, and their names spread throughout countless mortal worlds. As a matter of fact, there is no mortal world that doesn't know at least one primogen under a name or another. You can thus imagine that besides their peerless foundation, the faith power they wield must have reached a dreadful level. Even Asmodeus, who has long since been overthrown and became Taurotha's slave, is still worshipped in some backwater worlds. Therefore, if you want to surpass them, at the very least, you should first become a world god. Conrad nodded. The race primogens were all born at a rank he was still aspiring to. Conrad wasn't so conceited as to think himself their equal, yet. Moreover, this might be challenging for others, but with his unique skill set, Conrad didn't doubt that time was the only barrier he faced. As for the other faiths, when he trampled the two religious forces beneath his heels, wouldn't they naturally crumble? Therefore, Gulistan's use was minimal. Your words have merits. Unfortunately, only my most beloved women are qualified to be my partners. Others can only be my servants. Therefore, unless you're willing to warm my bed, I don't need you. As long as you don't bar my path, you can watch at ease how I tame this world. Though his lips had curled into a joking smile, no one doubted the seriousness of Conrad's words. Gulistan frowned, but before she could say anything, the butler interfered. Young master, even if you don't want to rely on House Circer's name and resources, at the very least, you should accept its protection. After all, in the future, your true nature is bound to spread throughout the world. At that time, are you truly confident that you can, alone, suppress all the evil-hearted? The Celestial Church will hunt you down to offer you in sacrifice to their merit steel, while some within the infernal cult will chase you to refine your bloodline. Only with the Lady and Patriarch protecting you can you cultivate in peace. Moreover, the Holy Continent's secular world is doomed to destruction. The Celestial Church won't intervene. That being the case, the Barbarian Continent is the next destination. Are you going to hide within some low-level kingdom just to avoid falling under the infernal cult's radar? He exclaimed, urging Conrad to accept what he saw as the inevitable. And before Conrad could retort, Another voice attacked. A man of high aspirations knows how to use all available resources and when to follow the tide. If because of your pride, you're not willing to rely on House Circer, then allow me to be blunt. Even if your talent defies all cognition, your future achievements will be limited. Also, you shouldn't get full of yourself because of your current prowess. Of our 7 inheritors, Ison was by far the weakest. The 6th is already at the Fate Wrestling Saint rank, while the 1st is a quasi-sage, half a step into the Divine Seed rank. Any one of them can pinch you with ease. And relying on this backwater place's resources, you can't catch up at the fastest pace. Diana, who'd remained silent until now, stated in an emotionless tone. Inwardly, Conrad disagreed. First, what he cared about was the secular world's vast human capital. Things like talent and resources he could breed on his own. They were no longer that important. But to build his invincible regimen of 100,000 saints, relying on the secular world was unavoidable. Second, in his opinion, those who looked down on the secular world were all retarded. They easily forgot that all cultivation resources came from the secular world. Be it holy crystal mines or rare alchemy ingredients, the secular world was the primary provider. It didn't lack resources. It lacked the means to put those resources to good use. After taking over the empire, he could freely use the system's recipes and Kron's knowledge to untap the country's hidden potential and lay down the foundation of his hegemony. By the time the Celestial Church deigned to pay him attention, it would be far too late. But if he abandoned this treasure trove to rush to the Circers, in the future, his growth pace was determined by them. A disturbing thought. Still, Conrad didn't let anything transpire on his face, and ignoring Diana, lifted his gaze toward Gulistan. Mother, I understand your concerns. However, I didn't come here to bargain with you. I just want to understand the plague you unleashed and how it will affect me. Let's discuss that before anything else. Shall we? The naked disregard she received from Conrad made Diana's stomach churn, but there was no way to voice her grievances. So, she just kept her mouth shut to avoid further disgrace. Both are linked. Gulistan sighed and dropped into her seat. To reach our goal, getting rid of the Celestial Church is inevitable. However, it's not enough. We must get rid of both the Celestial Church and the infernal cult, then reform the world's faith. Again, the gathered individuals were startled. Did Gulistan dare fight with the infernal cult? But seeing their reactions, she dismissed their rising thoughts with a wave of her hand. Don't misunderstand. I'm not that crazed. What very few know is that from Lord Talroth, I obtained a demon god's heart. Using that heart as anchor, my true self is carrying out a ritual as we speak. When the plague begins and death drops on the holy continent, that ritual will wrest the souls of the deceased from the reincarnation cycle and use them to feed Hell's Gate. Instantly, Conrad understood Gulistan's ploy, and his eyes widened in fright. Chapter 189, I have a better idea. Hell's Gate, Heaven's Gate. Those were the two most treasured objects of the two religious forces. Whoever triumphed over its foe would see their gate open to lead them back into their respective higher realm. The gates were indestructible. You want to summon an infernal legion? To Conrad's question, Gulistan immediately nodded. Yes, those billions of souls will give us enough power to slightly open the gate and allow Lord Stolas to send an infernal legion led by a minor Stolas god's avatar onto this world. Although it will be for a brief moment, that moment will be more than enough to destroy the Celestial Church once and for all. All demon gods possess their own infernal legions. According to the knowledge Kron gained from the Flamemark, no matter how weak the god or how small their legions were, the lowest of foot soldiers was at the sage level. Without a sage-level cultivation base, joining a demon god's legion was impossible. If the infernal cult could successfully summon one of Stola's legions, they wouldn't need a minute to obliterate the Celestial Church. That was a fact. Afterward, the gate closes, and the legion returns home. The infernal cult can then clean whatever remains and wipe out the celestial realm's faith from this world. Then, for triumphing over its foes and winning the holy war. The infernal cult will be allowed to ascend to the infernal realm and be ennobled in the houses of their chosen gods. The most meritorious will even see their cultivation boosted to the god level through contracts with mighty gods. Naturally, none of them will be stupid enough to pass such an opportunity, thus freeing the ancient crystal world for us to reform. Right now, the great elders and leaders of the two factions are the only one able to restrain me. Once they're gone, no one can stop me from erasing the higher realm's faith from this world while promoting yours. By the time you reach the peak of divine ascension, I have no doubt that the world will worship you as its god. You can then channel its faith power to break through godhood. Better yet, once you become the ancient crystal world god, throughout the three realms, no matter how powerful they might be, as long as you stay here, no deity can harm you, and only you can freely come and go from the higher realms to this world. Bold. A bold plan. While the others were startled by Guliston's words, Conrad was forced to admit that her plan was of impressive efficiency. He could just sit back and watch the events unfold, focusing on cultivation while she took care of the rest. It would be a lie to say the thought wasn't appealing. Alas, the cost was too high. On the one hand, he would, at the very least, lose half his potential faith power, and on the other hand, it was too time-consuming. Also, why did he need to wait for others to free spots? Why could he not just obliterate them? The correct way, the Conrad way, was to wipe out infernal cult and celestial church from this world through his own hands. How long until the plague begins and starts harvesting lives? Also, who will it affect? Thinking that he was starting to come around, Guliston replied, "The plague seed will germinate in a month. When it fully blossoms, all the non-demon unbelievers of the Holy Continent, beneath the transcendent rank, will perish within a week. As for those at the transcendent rank, they will go insane and attack whoever stands before them, unable to differentiate friend from foes." Good. Very good. From the start, Conrad saw an opportunity within this plague. However, due to him not possessing a god's heart, making use of it was impossible. But now, the situation was different. And since he required Guliston's god heart, he could only expose the plan. While good, your plan will make me lose half this world's faith power. To my foundation, that is harmful. We could do something else. Instead of using it to ruin the Holy Continent, we can use the Holy Continent's ruin to spread my faith, slow it down, and alter it to instill fear and desperation in the hearts of the masses, thus forcing them to seek shelter in a new god, a god that can save them from the calamity. Conrad began, his words causing a new wave of incomprehension to spread throughout the bystanders. I won't go into the details, but as long as you give me the god's heart, I have the means to control this plague for my own purposes while also healing those that pledge their souls to me. Seeing how my followers are saved, and their prayers answered, the desperate will flock to my banner, thus allowing me to convert the Holy Continent's masses through this plague. Naturally, we will need agents to spread my god name throughout the kingdoms and empires. I'm sure you can arrange that. Guliston frowned. Conrad seemed to possess too many skills that should not appear on him. Skills that made her resources lose all appeal. Though frustrated by her lack of control over him, she quickly dismissed those thoughts. After all, the more competent of a son he was, the easier her job would be. Yet, she shook her head. I must disagree. It is not that I doubt you, but even if you speak true, this is good for you, but terrible for House Circer. The plague required a tremendous merit loss. If we can't get the benefits out of it, when the time comes for the Holy War, the infernal cult faces destruction, and House Circer vanishes alongside it. That, I cannot allow. Guliston categorically rejected, but quickly afterward, her eyes shone with an impish light. Of course, if you could help me gain enough merit to make up for what we'd lose, and still be in an impregnable position, I will fully support you. Conrad's lips flashed a playful smile. Since you say, if I suppose you have a good idea. Shoot. I do, indeed. And as you can expect, it won't be easy. Seriousness returned to Guliston's playful gaze as she spoke. I want you to bring me back the body of the infernal cult founder. Bring it back, and the infernal cult can offer it to the Merit Steel. The founder was the Overlord's most favored descendant. Were it not for the fatal mistake of fathering Nephilim twins, he would now be one of the infernal realm's mightiest demon princes. Sending his body back to the Overlord is unparalleled merit, enough to turn our losses into gains. Conrad frowned. The infernal cult founder's connection to the Overlord was made evident by the supreme Overlord physique Yvonne obtained from his blood. However, he'd not expected him to hold such a lofty position. But then again, without such a noble status, his crime would have cost him his life. Still, some verification was necessary. Does she speak true? He asked the system, but got no answer besides a weighty silence. Yo, does she speak true? Sorry, system malfunctions. Yes. The system then fell silent. Taken aback by its reaction, Conrad's mind flashed with several thoughts. But at that time, Guliston's words resumed, and he quickly set them all aside. I suppose you must have heard of the Tower of Rebirth. Although that place hides incomparable dangers, whoever survives it obtains tremendous benefits. Elsmetz reached the 3rd floor and obtained the space and time attributes. Adelar von Jürgen reached the 3rd floor and obtained the inheritance of a past Paragon Spirit Sage, which he used as foundation to cultivate startling soul abilities. Better, he found the means to unseal his fiend blood. Thanks to the current Holy Flame Emperor embezzling half the country's treasury to fund an expedition, Yvonne Voigt reached the 7th floor and obtained a large quantity of the founder's blood. Thus, going from one of the most exceptional talents of an era to greatest talent in history. Meanwhile, the Emperor himself obtained mighty gains. Though, blessing or curse, it is hard to say. Still, if he can carry his plan to fruition and is allowed to cultivate in peace, he is doomed to become a sage in this life. Beneath her mask, Yvonne remained undisturbed. What she owed Ulrich, she'd paid back in full. And there are 9 floors. If you can reach the 9th, who knows what you can obtain? At least, I believe you can emerge with a god artifact. Also, time in the Tower of Rebirth flows differently from the outside. 1 month in our world equals 36 in the tower. Thus, you also have plenty of time to cultivate. How far you can go depends solely on you. So tell me, Conrad, are you willing? If you say yes, then by the time you return with the founder's body, my true self will be waiting for you with the god heart. Conrad closed his eyes for a brief moment of reflection, after which they opened with firm determination. We have a deal. He extended his hand toward Guliston, and with a radiant smile, she accepted it. We have a deal, she reiterated while giving him a firm handshake. And the butler who from the side saw mother and son bargain like common merchants felt his heart filled with sorrow. Chapter 190, The Potential Final Opponent. Though the mother-son pair maintained smiling faces and exchanged contented glances, Yvonne couldn't help but feel a wave of apprehension rise within her chest. Better than anyone, she understood the dangers of the Tower of Rebirth. With half the state's resources and the number 1 mercenary band, she and Ulrich had barely managed to reach the 7th floor. And even then, it took more luck than skills. Dozens of peak-stage semi-saints saw their lives harvested like flies for the 2 of them to reach that threshold. And while Conrad's current strength was leagues above theirs at the time, so was his aim. Moreover, from beginning to end, although she arduously worked on painting the image of a trustworthy partner bound by common benefit, Yvonne couldn't trust Guliston. Letting go of Guliston's hand, Conrad stepped back, once again turning toward Diana, who'd still not lost her cloaking. Using the system, he analyzed the nature of her physique, after which he reverted his attention back onto Guliston. I don't think we're at the gifting threshold yet. You can keep your treasure, but I believe you have something that belongs to me. May I have it instead? As those words left Conrad's lips, they provoked various reactions. Surprised by how little attention Conrad paid this Diana, Yvonne was perplexed. After all, She could feel the extraordinary air swirling around her form. Frustrated by Conrad's disrespect and incensed at being treated like cheap, tradable goods, Diana boiled in suppressed anger. Startled by Conrad's apparent knowledge of his inheritance, Gulistan frowned. The list of things Conrad possessed and knew was becoming hard to ignore. Now, she no longer doubted that in one way or another, Conrad had received his father's guidance. Extending her hand toward him, she summoned a purple ram statuette. It's an idol refined by your father through blood and infernal power. If you can successfully refine it, you should be able to awaken one of his physiques that lies dormant in your genes. As for which one, I cannot say. Gulistan explained while Conrad took the statuette into his hand for appraisal. Still, I must warn you. Although only those of his direct lineage can refine this idol, with your current cultivation level, doing so is suicidal. The infernal power within would obliterate you in seconds. At least wait until you reach the saint level. Following his personal assessment, Conrad agreed. The statuette turned into a light ray and vanished within his pouch. Heading into the Tower of Rebirth requires substantial preparations. Also, besides the tower's dangers, you'll have to confront the top talents of the two forces beneath the saint level. If you want, I can prepare a large number of holy crystals, war puppets, amulets, talismans, pills, and artifacts for you to use. I guarantee they will each come prepared. Especially with the approaching holy war, the quantity of resources put at their disposal this time will be exceptional. Gulistan spoke true. If the tower's danger accounted for 80% of the difficulty, then the remaining 20% was about surviving the greed of others. Without sufficient preparations, Conrad could easily fall into danger. And he knew it very well. However, I decline with thanks. With that said, he extended his hand toward Yvonne, who took it without delay, and together, they left the brothel, leaving the three Circer kinsmen alone. What do the two of you think of him? Gulistan asked Diana and the butler. He's too arrogant. Although his talent and foundation are unparalleled, at this rate, he's bound to butt against a mighty foe and suffer tremendous losses. Diana replied. Knowing that the lady's life is bound to his, he vented all accumulated spleen. For a young demon suddenly growing into power, that's understandable. However, if he is merely arrogant, why didn't he accept Lady Diana? Surely, she should have excited his incubus blood. Either he's throwing a tantrum, or he's suspicious of your ladyship's intentions. I'm inclined to lean on the later. The butler analyzed, his words causing an approving nod from Gulistan. Arrogance is preferable, but being unable to gain his trust on the first day was within expectations. As long as we convinced him that we work toward the same goal and that I hide nothing from him, his guard should have slightly lowered. In the future, we can build on that. Diana, your reluctance to offer yourself didn't help. If you can't fix this, I have no use for you. Gulistan's words sent a shiver down Diana's spine. Immediately, she dropped onto her knees. Please forgive my negligence. I will make sure to remedy the situation. Ignoring her, Gulistan sent the butler a mental message. Inform Isen's guards of their young master's fate. Perhaps we can use them to gain more points. The butler's face contorted into a frown. Still, he didn't dare disobey. Meanwhile, as the duo exited the brothel, they exchanged mental messages of their own. Since when do you only cooperate with your beloved women? Didn't you tell me that my father and you are currently in a business partnership? Yvonne asked while holding onto Conrad's arm. Indeed, weren't you a bit excessive toward her? I think so too, but apparently, my cheap mother disagrees. Conrad's words provoked a frown on Yvonne's face. Were you testing her bottom line? I'm not going to lie. At first, I didn't have anything against her. As the abused son that suddenly grew into formidable powers and realized her need for him, at worst, I would have taken a commanding stance to maintain appearances. But where did the cowardly Isen get the courage to insult her son before her? Clearly, he received her approval, meaning that the first thing she did was use her nephew to test my depths. Why is that necessary? Meanwhile, no matter how much I pushed, she didn't strike back. With the pride of a high-ranking sage, how can she tolerate such insults? Even if she can't kill me, can't she suppress me? Last, but not least, the girl. While with my bloodline and dual cultivator status, preparing a perfect partner makes sense, we can't ignore that oftentimes, women are offered to control men by proxy. Fortunately, I have something she's not aware of that allowed me to analyze the girl's physique. Otherwise, understanding that mother would have been more challenging. Conrad explained through the mental messages while the two crossed the city streets. She possesses a decadence physique. Whoever samples her body won't be able to stop himself from wanting more. Then more, and even more, until dependence completely sets in. Yvonne's eyes shone with fright. Although with my divine primal force, I can effortlessly nullify the effects, she doesn't know that. Why then does she offer me such a girl? Why did she pay the price to summon my father? For power. Because of foundation flaws, the ancient crystal world's natives have never managed to go beyond the late stage of divine transformation. After all, to reach the peak, you need to both reach divine transformation in the martial and spiritual paths while also possessing 27 supreme meridians at the very least. Together, for this world's natives, those two conditions are nigh impossible to fulfill. But for the woman that received the Southern King of Hell's blessings, does that still apply? Is such a woman satisfied with being God's mother? Why can't she be God herself? Once she fulfills her end of the bargain, what happens? At the end of the day, godhood is a cultivation level, and cultivation can be harvested. Who knows, perhaps I shall suffer a fate similar to Ulrich's father. Destroyed by kin at my peak. Chapter 191. What you don't have, you snatch. Now, of course, this is all hypothetical. But clearly, she, at the very least, wants to slowly gain control of me. Therefore, we cannot stay too close. For now, let her believe that there's hope for cooperation and that in the future, she can use her female wiles to take me down. Meanwhile, my growth continues. The founders' bodies are treasure troves. Not only the infernal founders, but I also want the celestial founders. When I obtain the heart from her hand, she can have the empty carcass. Afterward, if she renews attempts at friendly relationships, I can slowly lower my guard and give her more access. I can even make her believe I desire her. Give her an outward sense of control while maintaining inward vigilance. When my strength is enough, how I deal with her will depend on her choices. Enlightened by Conrad's insight, Yvonne nodded. But ultimately, she's an expert at the summit of this world. While you're analyzing her, she's analyzing you. We can't afford to show mistakes. Agreed. In several casual steps, they landed in the city's outskirts. Still, she did say one immutable truth. Before heading into the tower, you need ample preparations. Holy crystals, pills, artifacts, amulets, talismans, even war puppets, you can't lack any. Since you rejected her, I suppose you have your way of getting them? Hearing this, Conrad's lips curled into a devilish smile. The first truth under the heavens. What you don't have, you snatch. Banditry is the most natural path to wealth. We can't plunder the Holy Flame Empire's treasury, but that doesn't mean we can't take others. The Water Kingdom Alliance may rank fourth among the 5 secular forces, but once we pool all their state resources, we should have a hefty sum. After all, they even dared offer a mid-grade holy artifact as a betrothal gift. Of course, they can't be poor. Moreover, their top experts are only at the early stage of the Fate Wrestling Saint rank. With the two of us leading the charge, this raid is bound to go smoothly and yield an immense haul. In any case, I have some business there to take care of. Yvonne sighed and shook her head. Those were truly chaotic times where the feeble turned into lambs for the mighty to chop. With wolves such as Conrad running amok, how could there be peace on the land? Unredeemable. But before she could finish her words, both her eyes and Conrad's shone with vigilance. 7 dark rays shot from the shadows and dropped before them, revealing 7 men of various ages whose eyes shone with furor. The 14 globes stared at the emerald bracelet around Conrad's wrist. It's you. It's really you. You're our young master's murderer." The leader, a middle-aged human male, exclaimed, his voice full of indignation. Those 7 men were Ison's bodyguard and had followed him straight from the barbarian continent. Initially, they should have always remained by his side. Alas, due to Guliston's order, they were forced to stay outside the brothel and await his return. At first, they'd seen nothing wrong with that. After all, what could possibly happen to him while under his aunt's protection? Never did they expect that they'd receive news of his death on the day of their intended departure. Ison may be of a deplorable character, but he still was an inheritor. If they returned with news of his death, regardless of what occurred, their lives were forfeit. Veins beat on the leader's temple, and with a quick examination, Conrad could see that the weakest among the 7 was at the peak of the true Origin Saint rank, while the strongest was at the middle stage of the Fate Wrestling Saint rank. A formidable lineup. But before the leader could make a move, Yvonne's eyes flashed with a cold glint, and she threw out a palm strike. Dark sand erupted from her hand, morphing into 7 sand palms that slammed into the 7 men's chest and sent them flying against nearby trees with an eruption of blood. You what? Your master misbehaved and was punished accordingly. If you're dissatisfied, you can follow him to the grave. Letting go of Conrad, she stretched out her arms, causing a massive wave of dark sand to appear out of thin air and threaten to obliterate the 7 guards. Instantaneously, the 7 were alarmed. Misunderstanding. This is a misunderstanding. We're not here to fight. We're here to pledge our allegiance. Both Conrad's and Yvonne's eyes widened in disbelief, and simultaneously, the 7 sprawling men crawled onto their knees to kowtow in submission. Although we feel profound grievances at our master's loss, we understand that he offended a superior and got what he deserved. Alas, we're merely expendable goods. If we return to House Circer like this, all of us will perish. Therefore, our only path of survival is to embrace the thigh of a better master. Your lordship is the son of Lady Guliston and our god. Even without the inheritor rank, your status is leagues above that of any Circer scion. In the future, you must become a world hegemon. Although our value is small, we hope you will take us under your wing and allow us to make contributions. The leader exclaimed while remaining in his kowtowing position, and like a practiced rehearsal, the 6 others followed. Your lordship, please take us under your wing and allow us to make contributions. Yvonne was startled, and the sand wave floating above her vanished as she turned toward Conrad, whose eyes shared her surprise. Well, what can I say? As long as they are willing to submit, why say no to free Saint manpower? Conrad shrugged, and with a wave of his hand, 7 phantasm orchids appeared and flew toward the kowtowing men. If you swallow those, I will take you under my banner. In the future, the world will have your place. Without delay, the 7 men each grabbed their assigned phantasm orchid and swallowed them in one gulp. Since things had reached this point, even if it were a dreadful poison that required periodical antidote, they could only swallow. From the moment Ison perished, all paths of retreat had been cut. If they didn't cling on thicker thigh, following him to the grave was the only option. Chapter 192, The 10th Elder's Tragic Fate. Following the Saint Bodyguard's consumption of the phantasm orchids, Conrad concealed them within his space pouch, alongside the real Anselm cracked. He then turned toward Yvonne, whose eyes showcased doubt. Another one of your mother's tricks? The timing was too convenient. Was it not for Guliston's intel? How could those guards so promptly discover Ison's death and know who to chase? Most likely an attempt to show goodwill by sending free Saint labor force my way. In any case, it matters not. Let's go. My familiar is currently stalling the delegation. With an approving nod, Yvonne turned into a 2 meters long Hessonite-eyed cobra, whose pitch-black scales glittered in flaming orange at various intervals. In that form, she wrapped herself around Conrad's torso, with her head standing beside his. Hiss! Seeing Yvonne adopt the miniature version of her true form, Conrad rolled his eyes. Afraid? Yvonne voiced, You may be centuries older than me, but in the business of demonism, I'm your senior, Conrad declared, before stepping into the air and flying toward Kron's location. Meanwhile, a key member of Kron's delegation was currently suffering cruel abuse. The 10th Elder was being held by 2 of the 21 team members, while the rest formed an ordered line at Kron's sides. Still disguised as Imperial Duke Conrad, Kron punched the 10th Elder with one hand while healing him with the other. And though he wished to struggle, with his cultivation sealed by Kron, the 10th Elder didn't have the ability to resist and could only withstand the abuse. Having the audacity to disrespect my master, the nerves. Who the hell do you think you are? Are there still laws in the land? I must beat you black and blue. Kron roared while his fist flew at the 10th Elder's face. The semi-saints and transcendent knight delegation members who witnessed this scene inwardly shivered. Even in their wildest dreams, they'd never expected that they would one day behold the scene of a von Jürgen profound saint receiving such a thrashing in broad daylight. Naturally, following Kron's display of might, they didn't dare misbehave. The 10th Elder's cheeks didn't even have the time to get properly swollen before Kron's demonic healing powers soothed his wounds and restarted the whole process. Tears and desperation filled his face as he failed to comprehend what he did to deserve this. Who was the master he offended? And why was the eunuch boy suddenly displaying such tyrannical strength? When did the script go so wrong? Had he known things would take such a deplorable turn, he would have risked his life to refuse the assignment. Alas, the subjunctive proved his misery irreversible. Wait. The 10th Elder struggled to say between smacks. What? Any complaints? You can't beat me black and blue if you keep healing me. The 10th Elder's stammering words brought Kron sudden enlightenment, and his eyes shone with the new realization. That is correct. Why did I not think of this before? Assailed by this new dilemma, Kron fell into deep thoughts, giving the 10th Elder some time to catch a moment of respite. I know. I will first beat you black and blue, then heal you, then start it all over again. With this new resolution, Kron now used his 2 fists to knock out all the 10th Elder's teeth. Help! Help! Mercy! You are inhuman. Hearing those words, Kron wondered if his punches shocked that man's brain. As a demon familiar, he was, of course, inhuman. What point was he trying to make? But when Kron discarded those distracting thoughts to carry on with the punching session, Conrad descended from the sky, landing right by his side. His sudden appearance took the gathered individuals by surprise. Kron stopped his righteous deed and turned toward Conrad while the 10th Elder saw his heart filled with hope. I'm House von Jürgen's 10th Elder. Sir, if you rescue me from this demonic creature, glory, splendor, wealth, and rank will surely be yours. The 10th Elder exclaimed with his wide, expectant eyes. But before Conrad could reply, Kron's next words dashed all his expectations and nailed his hopeful heart onto the ground. Greetings, Master. Kron hailed and dropped onto his knees. The combination of his words and deeds were too much for the 10th Elder to bear. His body shook, and his tears flowed unrestrained. Injustice! This is an injustice. Pooh! The 10th Elder spat blood and in indignation passed out. Both Conrad and Serpent Form Yvonne blinked at this odd scene. Yvonne, in particular, failed to grasp how things reached this point. Useless waste. How dare you faint before Master? Are you telling him that his sight is too hard to bear? Wake up. Backhanded by Kron's right, the 10th Elder was forced back into awareness. Meanwhile, black lines marked Conrad's forehead. Your familiar possesses a unique disposition, Yvonne appraised following her round of stupor. Hum. Conrad cleared his throat, then activated the phantasm orchids Kron had forced down those men's throats. Heal the 10th Elder before we resume the trip, Conrad ordered Kron after rewiring the convoy's members. The delegation led 6 large carriages, each with enough space to comfortably house a dozen men. With the serpent form Yvonne still coiling around him, Conrad settled within one and sat crossed-legged in cultivation. Although he'd reached a breakthrough threshold in his martial and spiritual paths due to insufficient time, he'd yet to complete his transformations. 2 sets of diamond and rainbow-colored light swirled around his form as he officially broke through the 7th step of the Transcendent Knight rank and the 9th step of the Transcendent Priest rank. With his spiritual cultivation having reached the limit of the Transcendent rank, Conrad probed deeper into the infernal soul-devouring art's 2nd layer. Dark fog swirled around him as he comprehended more of its mysteries and approached mastery. Along the road, Conrad didn't forget to spend time on rune carving, studying the formation code while using large quantities of low-level crystals to test formations. In that manner, 3 days passed, and as the convoy reached the Water Kingdom Alliance's capital, Conrad's eyes shone with enlightenment. The dark fog dived into his eyes, and for an instant, they turned pitch black, leaving no place for white. And as the darkness vanished, Conrad mastered the 2nd layer of the infernal soul-devouring art. Alongside it, his soul power skyrocketed. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.